A notorious murderer who killed his entire family hired a governess who decided to change his fate. And this man tried to find out from the unfortunate woman what she wanted and why she dreamed of the title of Duchess. He asked Miss Margaret to let him in on her plans and explain how he could save her from such a miserable life. And Margaret spoke to him only so that he would not kill his younger children, Cedric and Cecile. A month ago she came to apply for the position of governess. The knight had already heard about her. He had already heard about her from the butler and decided to accompany her this morning. Some changes had occurred in her life. First, she received a position as a governess in the Duchy of Berta. Due to financial problems in the family, she had to look for work. And secondly, she remembered her past life. It was not just a dream, a completely different world. A level of development of civilization that differs from the usual, a country in which predominantly people with dark hair and eyes live. In that world, she was a teacher with more than 30 children in her care, and she died because she was hit by a truck on the way to work, and out of the blue, memories of her past life came into her head. The knight introduced Miss Estella to the butler, who introduced himself as Javier, the butler of the Berta family. He looked through her resume and, praising her qualifications and handwriting, said that she was an excellent teacher. He explained that she would look after young Master Cedric and young Cecile, but the girls' lessons would be more like a game. Mrs. Cecil speaks a little slowly, and the girl asked what words she had problems with. She knew names and some simple words, but Mr. Cedric was a real prankster. He is mischievous but quite smart, so there should be no problems with training him. What nonsense, thought Estella. Teaching little boys is a real challenge. And he also asked the miss to make sure that she never crossed paths with the young Duke Diego. Seriously, she asked. Of course, he replied. Diego may be a well-mannered young man, but no one knows what might happen. It was the first time Estella had heard this name, although it seemed very familiar to her. The butler explained that Diego is the half-brother of Cecile and Cedric, which is why there is a strained relationship between them. Yeah, she said with a start, but suddenly asked in surprise what? Cedric, Cecile, Diego Berta, did she really end up in the novel she read in her past life? Diego Berta is the hero of the novel, a dangerous marriage contract with the Duke, and she saw this name just before she died. So I needed to calm down and better remember the details. According to the plot, the previous Duke Bertha was not known for his good character. He treated his first wife, Dolores, Diego's mother, coldly, simply because he did not find her attractive. And eventually, Dolores' mental state gave way and she died. His second wife was Anna, a rather cunning woman, but the Duke fell head over heels in love with her. They later had a son, Cedric, and a girl, Cecile, and Anne became a duchess. Naturally, the Duke wanted to make Anna's son his heir, and he also attempted to kill his firstborn, Diego. Could it be, she wondered anxiously, that her memories of her past life would help her escape from here? The butler informed the young gentleman that their governess, whom he had spoken of yesterday, had arrived. Suddenly Estella remembered that she was the governess of Margaret Montiel, one of the characters in the novel. And later, she will be destined to die at the hands of the infamous prodigal son Diego. Cedric asked her briskly if she could see through her thick glasses and if she could teach him how to fight demons. So her goal is to protect these children. Margaret was out for a walk when a servant noticed her and called her to come in for a second. As Margaret passed by, she asked Aunt Gill what had happened. The girl asked the teacher to take a couple of ripe apricots. They were very big, and my aunt asked me to take them because she needed to maintain her strength. Margaret was very touched by her concern, and Gill was amazed that this was the first time she had worked as a governess with such success. And now she has been working as a governess in the duchy for a month and is trying to look at this situation with optimism. In the end, thanks to her memories, she will be able to survive. Estella wished good morning to the young master and young lady. Cedric immediately ran to the governess, asking what she had in her hands and whether she had brought him anything to eat. Margaret explained that it was for a young lady, and the boy indignantly asked if he didn't exist. He tried to reach out and demanded that the basket be lowered, but the girl refused him, and she explained that the last time he tried strawberries, he spat them out, saying that they were too sour because he doesn't like fruit. During her month in the duchy, she realized a couple of things. The first thing is that avoiding the main male character is as easy as pie. After all, you can just be with children all the time. Diego always considered it a bad omen to meet his younger brother. And as long as they avoided each other, she was out of danger. She asked in horror when he had managed to get so close, but Cedric had already managed to put the apricot in his mouth and immediately choked. The governess helped him spit out the bone by telling him that it couldn't be eaten. "Good luck, I managed to teach him a lesson." Cedric asked if she had just hit him and was also cursing, the governess asked, and he thought she would praise him. Margaret asked the young lady if she would like to try the apricot, asking her to take a bite but not swallow the pit. The little girl did just that, tasting the fruit. Cedric worriedly asked Cecile not to repeat her brother's mistakes. But unlike her brother, she really liked fruits and ate them with pleasure. The youth lamented what was happening to the world, saying that society had gone mad. The second thing she realized in a month was that, despite the first impression, the children obey her well. She was very nervous at the first meeting, but then she realized that they were no different from ordinary children. Margaret had just started the lesson when a female voice suddenly called out to Cedric, asking if he was there. Looking into the room, Duchess Anne realized that her son was busy. The governess wished the Duchess good morning, informing her that they were just about to begin their lesson. But then the woman noticed that there was another person in the room and asked what Cecile was doing there. Margaret explained that she was bored, so she let her sit with them since she was not disturbing. The Duchess turned coldly to Cecile, and the girl cowered in fear. The butler said that she had started studying mathematics, and coldly asked if she had mastered combat yet. "Not quite," the youngest daughter replied anxiously. The Duchess asked why her progress was so slow. Margaret asked the Duchess for forgiveness, assuming that the young lady was having difficulty mastering addition at this stage. Anne asked if she meant to say that her daughter was stupid. Yes, she had missed that the person to be afraid of was the Duchess. She was quite hot-tempered and more dangerous than Diego, with whom they had never crossed paths. Margaret stood up for the little girl, explaining that she didn't mean that, she just needed her own pace of learning. Anna praised Miss Margaret for this statement and asked if Lion planned to teach her. Asked if she had ever heard of someone who couldn't be trained. Estella thought she was planning to fire her. But suddenly the young gentleman asked, "Why not? She really is stupid. Isn't a child who can't talk at 5 years old considered retarded?" He asked his mother to forget about Cecile, and he asked to ask him for success, saying that he had already mastered the origin of Mesquita. After the lesson, Estella asked why he was lying, exaggerating his sins before the Duchess, and even calling his sister stupid. Cedric said he didn't care because he saved her from the devil. Estella taught him not to call his mother the devil. But to be fair, thanks to him, she left happy, and Margaret promised him that she would carry her on her back after class. She asked the young gentleman to sit still because he was heavy, and it would be bad if he fell. But suddenly on their way, they met the third brother of the family, Bert. Looking in horror at Diego Berta, who was looking at her with contempt, she worriedly wondered what he was doing here at this time. The man looked sternly at the new governess. The girl tensed up, but soon greeted the gentleman after all. This was their first meeting. Diego said that he realized who she was and looked at the girl and her surroundings again. The guy realized that she was very busy looking after the children, and he said that it comes from his mother, who praised Cedric very much. "It seems that he learns quickly," Diego asked. Yes, Margaret confirmed. He had already calculated Mesquita's origins. His lie was spreading further and further. Diego chuckled and said he was impressed that he already knew so much, but suddenly he called out to Cedric and said that he was no longer even paying attention to him. He apologized to his brother, but Diego still told the governess that she should also teach him manners. Although, frankly speaking, this is the responsibility of the parents, he continued. However, he clearly will not learn this from them. In fact, Estella agreed with Diego. Duke Berta not only treated his ex-wife cruelly, but also had affairs on the side. And the Duchess supported him in these matters, but mentioning such things in front of a child is a completely different matter. With a heavy sigh, Estella decided to talk to the Duke's first son. She asked the gentlemen to go to the site first and, asking them to hold their hands tightly, ordered them to go. Cedric obeyed his teacher without question and ran out into the street, dragging his sister along with him. Diego noted that he did not remember asking them to leave. Margaret apologized to the gentleman, but she also said that she thinks adult matters should be discussed with adults. She said that from today on she would begin to teach the young master manners. But he definitely didn't want to ignore him. He was just still very young and not familiar with many things. She was able to say this, but the main rule of education is to treat children as children. But looking at him, it seemed as if he was about to yell at her and fire her. But contrary to expectations, Diego grinned and asked her name. Estella Margaret Montiel, she answered anxiously, and asked to be called Miss Margaret. Diego thought he now understood why the butler wasn't worried about the children. She was clearly a good governess. Not knowing how to react, Estella thanked. Mom wanted to throw a dinner tonight to celebrate Cedric's genius, but he reminded Dad of his busy schedule. They postponed the event, but if he helps him, he will be able to finish the work early and will be free tomorrow. So he was looking forward to Cedric's talk about Mosquita's origins at dinner tomorrow. And, of course, the hard-working governess would have to be present. Estella was in a stupor. Today they only read and remembered 120 pages, but because of his lie, Cedric will have to remember all 500. If he disgraces himself tomorrow, the Duchess will throw her out immediately, and how will she live without money until she finds a new job? And then Margaret rushed after the young liar gentleman. Cedric asked what she was talking about, and the governess shouted that they didn't have time for that, and that they were studying all night today. As a result, they studied until late. Margaret woke the young gentleman, saying that it was time for dinner and to get ready. She told him to get ready, and at the same time review the material. Cedric was already sick of it. But they did the best they could. At least Cedric took responsibility for his lie. All these exercises in memorizing from a past life bore fruit, thanks to fleeting memories. And now, all that's left is to survive tonight. The Duke, Duchess, and their firstborn Diego were already waiting for them at the table. The boy ran up anxiously and sat down at the table opposite his mother, and he greeted his older brother with embarrassment. Diego praised him and said that he hoped he would not disappoint anyone today. Estella was amazed by this man. The eldest son noticed that Miss Margaret looked exhausted, and the girl trembled, and she asked irritably, "Really, it was very strange, because she had slept so well that night." But Diego, as luck would have it, noticed that he had heard that the light in the classroom had been on all night. The tension between the young people grew with every second. But then Duke Bertha interrupted their disagreement and said that Miss Margaret was praised by many people. He had heard that Cedric was an excellent map-savvy man, but Estella thought he was flattering her. The girl felt that the Duke and Duchess were not particularly interested in testing Cedric's knowledge. Diego was the real pain in the ass here. He told his father that he heard Cedric was doing well in history, and he suggested that the family check it out. Well, of course, it was worth expecting. Then the father, clearing his throat, asked Cedric not to think too hard, but to simply answer. Hesitantly, he asked his son if he knew how the regent of Terios had treated immigrants during the Great Famine. They talked about this at the end, and the girl was sure that he would definitely cope, and Cedric really remembered. He replied that immigrants started doing illegal things because they had nowhere to live. The regent of Terios imposed severe punishment for these things, and most of the immigrants became slaves. As a result, the Mosquito were able to eradicate the root of crime and enrich and strengthen the state. The parents were incredibly delighted with how smart their child was. But then Diego said that after several generations, the royal family called for the abolition of slavery, and he asked the younger one if he would explain why. Cedric began to strain every part of his brain to remember at least something. Margaret felt sorry for the student and wondered if he really wanted to humiliate his brother like that. But to the governess's surprise, Cedric found the answer and explained that it was because the number of slaves had increased. The nobility preferred to have cheap slaves rather than free people, and it became difficult for commoners to earn a living. Because of this, the common people began to rebel louder and louder, so the royal family could no longer ignore them. Then Diego asked which of the kings had long wanted to abolish slavery, and Cedric quickly answered, Brant II. Margaret had a hard time keeping her face open between her joy for this amazing student and her pride in herself. There was a book that told children the genealogy of all the kings through song, an ideal memorization technique. "That's right," Duchess Anne exclaimed enthusiastically, praising her son. "He's an excellent student." And filled with pride, she told Diego that she hoped that later he would be able to help him with his work. After remaining silent in response to his mother, he told his brother that it seemed he had not missed a single class. He also said that he had worked hard, and for Cedric, his older brother's words were very valuable. Cedric thanked him sheepishly and said that he had heard he was even more talented at his age, and loudly and respectfully he declared that he dreamed of becoming like him. Mother was horrified and froze in a stupor. Diego was alarmed by this, but Estella thought it was a sweet dream. The Duke joyfully exclaimed that it was simply wonderful. He was glad that they were so friendly. And now he wished everyone a bon appetit and said that today he wanted to have a drink. And as a reward, he would write her a promissory note, so he asked Estella to come to him after dinner. It was an honor for her. After dinner, Margaret indignantly thought about what kind of bill he was going to write out for her there and what century it was from. It's obvious that he and the Duchess went to drink somewhere else. It's a pity that she didn't have so much money, but the Duke will soon die, and she didn't want to have anything to do with Diego. The only option left was to run away with the children, but before that I had to earn some money. That's just how fate would have it. She decided to wait for him a little in the office, but as soon as she opened the door, she froze. At the end of the office sat Diego, who, distracted from his book, called out questioningly to Miss Margaret. The governess asked the young Duke in surprise what brought him here. Diego asked what was strange about him coming to his own library. He came in to find a book to read before bed, asked what she was doing there, but figured it out himself. Margaret said she would go thinking about why she kept running into him. The least she wanted was to stop crossing paths with the future killer. But then Diego admitted that she surprised him. He knew that Cedric was not particularly interested in studying. But overnight a miracle happened. A miracle, Estella asked again. Cedric really did learn everything. He continued to advance, and Margaret wondered warily why he was so close. Advancing further, he asked the governess why she was moving away, pressing her against the bookcase. "Because they can talk comfortably at a distance of 5 steps from each other," she replied. "Maybe so," Diego answered pompously, but then he wouldn't be able to see her eyes. Margaret was embarrassed and tense, but Diego was amused by this situation. He especially can't see her eyes behind those incredibly thick glasses. Incredibly thick, Estella thought indignantly. Such glasses are an indispensable tool for a teacher. Having gathered herself, she asked what was wrong with his younger brother deciding to take up his studies. They are family after all. Margaret didn't understand what his problem was. She talks about family, so Diego found it funny to hear that she considered them family. She thought, why commit such a monstrous act? It's one thing to hate your cruel parents, but why was it necessary to kill innocent children? After a pause, he confidently said that it was immediately obvious that she was not from their family. She was different. Margaret explained that she was just trying to do her job as a teacher. But suddenly they both heard voices behind the wall. He was telling them to leave him alone. A female voice was saying that something needed to be done. Until he grew up a lot, the man answered that it was not so easy. He was still the eldest son. Behind this wall was the Duke's office, and suddenly the Duke asked her if she thought it would be easy to get rid of him. Diego asked what was going on. He thought he heard something and moved forward towards the wall. But then Estella cried out in alarm. It was definitely a rat. There must be a rat in the wall. "Rat?" the guy asked. But he clearly heard someone's voice. But the girl tried to convince him otherwise. It was a nightmare. She just couldn't let him hear this conversation, so she willfully covered his ears with her hands. And she worriedly but with care asked him not to listen. At that very moment, Anna's scream was heard from the office. She asked him to hire killers and swore loudly. She screamed that she was doing this for him and Cedric. He was one of the best in the West. Either he would die himself or be stabbed, he would see. And unfortunately, Diego heard everything. After it was all over, he carefully removed Margaret's hand. Now it's clear, he said, why she said something about a rat. And upset by the words he heard, he asked her to forget what she had just heard. He turned away as if nothing had happened, but the reasons for his desire to kill his father and the rest of the family became clear to her. It was necessary to strike first in order to survive. He advised her not to use what she heard in the future. Otherwise, she would not leave the capital alive, but Estella admitted that she had no intention of leaving. She modestly asked the young gentleman if he was okay. Diego asked why he shouldn't be. And, leaving, he gave the governess advice to find another job. If she stayed for a little longer, she would go crazy. At that moment, she realized the meaning of his words, and it was his last act of mercy. The next day, seeing the state of the teacher, Cedric asked what was wrong with her, whether she had gotten drunk the night before. "What is he talking about?" asked Margaret. The governess was unfamiliar with the word alcohol, but she smelled of it. "What? It can't be." The girl was surprised. She checked that it didn't smell like him. She did drink after all, Cedric realized. "Well," she replied, she had to settle a couple of issues. Thoughts about yesterday were throwing her off track. But she relaxed too much. Until now, she had simply lived peacefully with her children. Be that as it may, it was necessary to come up with a plan urgently. So, one morning of the following day, while Diego was changing his clothes, there was a knock at the door. The guy was surprised, but assumed that it was the butler who came and told him to come in. Margaret, standing behind the door, trembled. Finally, he was in the house. She had been waiting for him for many days, and she enthusiastically decided that today she would definitely tell him everything. But when she entered, she froze in horror, and Diego said that he would look at the documents, so he asked her to leave them on the table. Estella turned away in embarrassment and nervously called out to the gentleman. He turned around sharply when he heard a female voice. Blushing terribly, she asked for forgiveness, saying that she had not seen anything, and Diego asked her to simply tell him why she was there. Having calmed down, Estella cleared her throat and explained that she wanted to ask for a favor, and he asked what she wanted. "Nothing of the sort," replied the governess, speaking of the weather and the beautiful blossoming flowers. Yeah, it seemed like Diego thought he knew what was going on, thinking how predictable it was. He met women who dreamed of more, and after exchanging just a few words with him, they imagined that they would become closer. So did she really think she could manipulate him because of what happened? Estella said that it would be sad to waste such a day, and Diego wanted to say that she had misunderstood everything. Suddenly, the governess enthusiastically asked, how about them going for a walk with their younger brother and sister? A walk? Diego asked devastatedly. And why would he go for a walk with them? That time, Estella explained, he left the office first, and she lingered for a moment and heard something else. Diego suggested that he clarify one thing. No matter what she heard, she should not dare to manipulate him. But Estella had no intention of using this information against him. She simply wanted to make a deal. He would not lose from this. From what she heard, it became known that Duke Bert had a spy in the house of the Marquis of Beautry. In fact, she knew from the book that Marquis Beautry supported Diego's mother's side, and according to the plot, he prevented Duke Berta from changing the heir because of their strong mutual trust. It was difficult for Diego to look for a spy in the Marquis's house. The guy asked what she would get out of the deal, and Estella asked if it really mattered to him. And having resigned himself, the young Duke asked what she wanted from him. Estella repeated, as she had said, she was asking him to take a walk with his younger children. Although irritated if that was all she wanted, then he agreed. Then, as Diego put it, it made her angry. When they went out for a walk, Cedric was quite tense and his sister was scared. And Diego himself tensely asked Miss Margaret since when tea drinking turned into a lesson outside. "That's it," exclaimed the governess, and awkwardly explained that the task was to enjoy nature. Seeing that they didn't believe her, she said that she was serious and even took an encyclopedia of plants with her. She turned to the young master and young lady and informed them that today they would learn about some types of plants. Sarek asked what they should do with it, and the girl explained that this knowledge could be useful to them in the future to make a gift or plant a garden. She pointed to the pictures and said that now they would play a game. Whoever found the most plants from this book would receive a prize. "What kind of prize is this?" the girl asked in surprise. If she chooses the prize, it won't be interesting, so she gave the winner the opportunity to skip the lesson or get something tasty. The children were interested and tense, waiting for the teacher's command, and when she counted from 1 to 3, Cedric and Cecile ran to look for herbs. Right in front of her employer, she says that the child can skip class as a prize. How brave. But suddenly Estella asked the gentleman why he was sitting. Diego asked and the governess asked. He didn't think that he would just sit and remain silent. The guy asked if she was really offering to pore over this botany book with them to find out who the spy was. It would be cruel, she asked if he agreed. Diego asked Miss Margaret if this was some kind of revenge for Cedric. But then she interrupted him, not even listening. It seemed like they had already found the flower, and said that at this rate, he would lose. Reluctantly, Diego stood up, grumbling and cursing, and he said that if he ever started to hate the teaching profession, it would be her fault. "Yeah," Estella replied anxiously, thinking that if he started to resist, she wouldn't survive it. The children continued to run through the forest in search of plants, and suddenly Cecile found a beautiful flower. But suddenly she saw an approaching shadow and looked around in horror. This big shadow turned out to be her older brother, who did not have the best intentions. He saw that she had already found a couple of flowers. The little girl was scared of her brother and stood trembling. He asked if she would show them to her brother. "No," she loudly exclaimed, "no." "What kind of reaction is that?" Diego asked indignantly. "Does she really think he will take them away from her?" Then Diego offered her a trade and asked what she wanted, dresses, cookies, or jewelry. The little girl's eyes lit up, and her brother asked her to knock out whatever she wanted, because it was better to get it from him than from Miss Margaret. He asked to give him flowers, and the girl, who was lured with things, handed the flowers to her brother. But suddenly there was a rustling sound and then a scream. Diego looked around in surprise and realized that he was caught. Dropping the flowers in shock, Cedric indignantly asked Diego if he was cheating. The exemplary brother who always looks after and cares for those below him in position was showing his dark side. So the boy snitched on the fact that his brother was cheating and wanted to take the flowers from Cecile Margaret. Diego immediately told him to shut up. He promised his brother that he would buy him what he wanted, but suddenly Cecile saw someone ahead. "Margaret!" she cried, and Diego froze. "And here he is, caught again." She asked the master sadly if he wanted to win by intimidating his juniors. Diego rolled his eyes and let go of his brother. While Cedric was trying to catch his breath, moving away from his brother, Cecile noticed that the teacher was scolding Diego. And deciding to feel sorry for her little brother, she pulled Diego by the sleeve and handed him a flower. She asked her brother to take it, and the young duke looked at them thoughtfully. Having accepted the flowers from his sister, he nevertheless extended the bouquet towards the governess, and he said that there was no condition that the flowers had to be picked with one's own hands. At the sight of this, Estella was surprised. Her eyes opened wide and a blush appeared on her cheeks. Seeing this, Cecile enthusiastically thought that it was just like a fairy tale. And indeed, looking at this, one could have interpreted everything incorrectly. This is exactly how the children understood that Diego was confessing to Margaret. "No, he won't admit it," Margaret cried out embarrassedly, but the boys were already absorbed in another outcome of events. They returned to the picnic area, and there Estella asked Diego how he managed to bribe Cecile. The guy replied that he didn't understand what she was talking about, but to Estella, everything looked strange. Cecile did everything to protect him, and afterwards, she was overjoyed that her brother confessed. Diego mockingly asked how it was that she couldn't understand the child she was teaching. Well, so the guy immediately changed the subject of the conversation, who is the spy. Estella was surprised by the change of direction, but she knew the answer. The spy was his great-uncle, Lord Frencham, and Diego asked him what his motive was. "He thinks he's hunting the Marquis," the governess explained. "The current Marquis of Beautry is in poor health. His eldest son died several years ago, and he has no other direct heirs. Lord Frencham probably feels he has a better chance of inheriting the title than the Marquis's younger son." "No wonder," Diego replied. Neither he nor his mother, neither of them had ever been liked by his great-uncle. Although his grandfather loved his brother very much, and of all the children, his mother was the most loved. Margaret asked what his mother was like. Come to think of it, she knew almost nothing about Diego's mother. The original story only said that she was considered unattractive. As if that was all that could be said about her, Diego hesitated and then decided to give an answer. And, to Estella's surprise, he said that his mother was an incredibly wise woman. Estella noticed that Diego also had this expression on his face, full of tenderness. It seemed like she was looking at him for too long, and Diego noticed the fact. The guy, not understanding, asked why she was looking at him like that, but the girl awkwardly said, "Nothing like that." I asked her why she was fiddling so awkwardly with those flowers, and she nervously replied that she wanted to make a beautiful arrangement. Where she grew up, there is such a thing as the language of flowers, and each flower symbolizes something. This seemed to interest Diego, and he asked what the flower in her hands meant. "There is peace in the house," she answered, and the guy turned cold. He covered the flower with his hand and asked to give it to him so that he could throw it away. But suddenly, Estella stopped him, and Diego asked what she was doing. She didn't want to throw it away. But then the girl pulled the gentleman's hand towards herself and anxiously asked what was wrong with his hand. Pulling his hand back, he asked if she was really surprised by such things after hearing everything in the library. Estella winced and tensed, and Diego explained that a killer came to him last night. The girl anxiously asked if he was badly injured, and the young duke, examining his hand, said that he knew that this could happen. He hurt his wrist, nothing special, but suddenly he noticed the girl's anxiety and asked what was wrong with her. Diego in the novel is nothing more than a villain. But in reality, it is too multifaceted to be described in a couple of sentences. But he is definitely a pretty callous person. Suddenly, Cecile laid her head on Estelle's shoulder from behind and said tiredly that she wanted to sleep. Margaret asked the young gentleman if he wanted to sleep too, and he nodded wearily. She carefully laid the babies on her lap and covered them with a blanket, and soon the children fell asleep. And indeed, we fell asleep as soon as we lay down. Diego noticed how easily they fell asleep in broad daylight. Margaret explained that children are easily drowsy. And besides, at their age he was the same. Diego exhaled and agreed that it was so. The guy looked at his sweetly sleeping sister and without thinking touched her soft hand with his finger. Today was a more peaceful day than Estella had expected, but could she hope for anything? And then she decided to ask Mr. Diego if they could get together like this again. The young man paused before giving an answer and dryly refused Miss Margaret's request. Estella was surprised, not understanding the reason for the refusal. He said that this was not necessary. "This kind of thing doesn't make sense," he explained himself, and said that was enough. After what was said, he left. Perhaps now he understood that this woman was also a threat to him. He didn't think they wanted to sit next to him, they just felt sorry for him. Because she doesn't need anything from him. Margaret values family unity because she thinks he is a man who believes that children deserve love. She will clearly interfere with the implementation of his plan, and if she decides to take the children out of the mansion, then he will have to deal with her too. Diego froze and stopped as he imagined this. He remembered that the butler had said that she was from the north. If only he could send her back to her hometown for a while when it all happened. Remembering how she touched his hand, he clenched his fist and said, "What nonsense! Why would he show such attention to her?" he immediately thought. "She has nothing." Deciding that this was a useless thought and all thoughts in general, he continued walking towards the mansion. One day, Cedric walked along the corridors of the estate, humming a melody. He was happy about today's holiday and thought, no more mom and dad. Lately he had grown up, and Cecile had become more and more talkative. And most importantly, he felt how he and his brother were becoming closer to each other. At first he was embarrassed when Margaret brought Diego to their class, and he stayed with them until quiet time, which meant they were getting closer. But before he could enter the room, he suddenly froze in surprise upon seeing his mother, and asked what she was doing there. The woman slammed the book shut and asked her son to go through, saying tensely that they needed to talk. Cedric asked if she wasn't going to the festival, and Anna said she needed to talk to him, so she would go separately. The boy asked what about Margaret and Cecile. The woman replied that they would start the lesson later, and they were probably already in the classroom. She was a little worried, but everything went well. His father was also happy. Cedric said that she praised him too much. "He overpraises," Anna asked. "It's obvious that he is the future of this house, although there was a small problem, but it is easily solved." So she needs to say something, even in jest, especially in front of her father. He shouldn't praise Diego the way he did at dinner. His father can't stand him and asked if Cedric understood her. Cedric, alarmed, explained to his mother that he was not interested in the inheritance. Well, here he is again. But then the boy shouted loudly that he couldn't handle it, telling his mother that she understood this perfectly well herself. Compared to him, his brother is much better. The heir is his elder brother since he could be greedy. Duchess Anne looked at her son with disappointment, and the boy cowered in fear. But if Margaret were here, she would reassure him, saying that it was too early for him to think about it. And realizing this made Cedric feel even more pain. Anna said that he was still too young and did not understand anything, and asked if he thought he would be able to continue living peacefully if Diego received the title. She asked what would happen if she and her father were gone, who would protect him in this house. This ruthless monster would kill him. Cedric's heart sank. But he still shouted out that his brother would definitely not do that. And then Anna raised her voice at her son, shouting that he would do exactly the same, telling him to stop talking nonsense. "No," Cedric shouted fearfully but confidently. He could laugh and chat with his brother as if nothing had happened. And recently they even went for a walk together. He doesn't hate them that much, so they can get along, and asked, right? Hearing this, the woman asked in horror what he had just said. Margaret took them for a walk with Diego. Gil was standing and preparing soup when suddenly Estella came into her and wished her a good day. The cook was surprised at first and asked who was there, and when she noticed the girl, she noticed that she was late. Margaret explained that the lady said she had something to talk to Cedric about, so the lesson was a little delayed. Gil assumed that the governess was hungry and handed her a bowl of soup. Estella thanked Gil for the soup in surprise and began to eat, but kept an eye on the cook. And suddenly she asked how long she had been working here. After thinking about it, Gil said that it had been about 15 years. "So," she asked Margaret, She worked under the previous mistress. Gil was surprised it was impossible to talk about such things, and she asked her to keep quiet. But Margaret was simply curious about what kind of person she was. Gil replied that she was good, a little picky, but noble. She was well versed in art, so when she was there the mansion looked like an art gallery, but she doesn't understand it at all. But even someone like her would be delighted if she saw this. She would never have thought that she would die like this. "Didn't she die of illness?" Estella asked, but that was just what the doctor said. But that year, one lady from the whole city became infected with it, and immediately after the funeral, the Duke married Anna. It seems that Gil had spoken too much, so she asked Margaret not to tell anyone what she had told her. "Yes," she answered and asked what they were talking about. Gil praised the girl, and she noticed that the mansion was empty today. Gil explained in surprise that today was a big festival. Many had already left for the holiday, and in the evening, the owners would also go to the temple to pray. So today was a holiday. Well, Mesquita is an agricultural country. Obviously, they have a big holiday in the spring. But suddenly, Estella froze and thought, the big festival, spring, it seemed like she was missing something. Wait, when the Duke was killed there. But suddenly, her anxiety was interrupted by another piece of news. A maid ran into the kitchen in search of Miss Margaret, and she anxiously reported that Madame was looking for her. And now Estella has already appeared before the mistress's court, which is pressing upon her. Anna angrily asked her how she was supposed to understand everything in such a situation. Trembling with fear, Cedric turned to the teacher, who apologetically said that she did not understand what she was talking about. The Duchess chuckled, saying that she was pretending, that she could do it very well. Her calm face was beautiful. But the governess asked the lady to tell her what had happened so that she could explain herself. Then, coming closer, she ordered her to say why she should hear. Estella took a step back. And Anna asked threateningly that her son was spending time with his crazy brother. Estella tensed up. Oh, she found out, she thought anxiously. She explained well that this should be kept secret from the lady. It was her mistake. She forgot that they were children and something like this could easily happen. Margaret said she could tell how it happened, but Anna refused. She said she was not interested and reminded him that she had clearly told them not to have contact. Margaret apologized for creating a situation that she could misunderstand, and she said that in the future she would be more attentive. Anna liked this submission. Now she understood that there was nothing special about being an aristocrat, obeying only one of her words. I wanted to see this again, and the woman asked how one could trust someone's word. But then Cedric pulled her away and told his mother that Estella had done nothing wrong. He said that he asked her because he wanted to be with his brother, so he begged her not to scold her. Estella was flattered by the gentleman's behavior, but suddenly she noticed a movement in her direction. While slapping Estella, Anna shouted that she asked him to stop talking such nonsense. After that, Anna asked what he saw and said that when he doesn't listen, someone else will suffer. The boy froze in fear and a lump rose in his throat. And Anna ordered him to speak, asking if he didn't have enough governess, whether to bring her Cecile. Estella asked the lady what she was talking about, and Anna asked if she could see it herself. Whether she is involved in Cedric's upbringing at all, Estella said, means it is not enough. That all this time she was beating Madame Cecile for what the young master did. She was holding back her anger. And to her horror, the Duchess wearily declared that sometimes children deserved corporal punishment. This made Estella angry, and she screamed that this was child abuse. Anna screamed angrily. Why on earth was she raising her voice? Where had it ever been seen that a worker was against the owner? Estella replied that how could an adult do this to a child? It was an indication of her cowardice. Now she understood the reason why Cedric had been especially careful to defend Cecile in front of the Duchess. And why was the lady so nervous in front of her? These terrible people, how far are they going to go? If this is her idea of upbringing, then she can no longer indulge in it, because she has no right to be considered a parent. In response to this, Anna laughed loudly and said that she was very much mistaken. Did she really think that a parent is someone who plays with children? And, dumbfounded, she asked how she dared to teach her, ordering her not to interfere when she was instilling discipline in the children. But Estella did not give up trying to convey that her discipline was not education, but violence, and she was obliged to protect them. True, Anna asked. It's a pity because that's all. And she announced that she was fired, ordering the governess to get out of there by this evening, her heart breaking. When the Duchess finally left, Estella picked up her glasses from the floor and Cedric wiped away his tears. And after this, Estella asked the young gentleman to come over for a minute, and she began to examine him carefully. There were no serious injuries on his arms or legs either. Thank God there were no wounds. She was very happy about that. Although she didn't know about the lady, Cedric called out to Estella, but the girl kindly asked him not to worry, saying that she was fine. But suddenly the boy threw himself straight into the teacher's arms. Crying, he said that he really enjoyed spending time with her. Estella reassured the boy that she was not going anywhere, but Cedric heard that she had just been kicked out. "It's okay," Estella answered confidently. "They just need to go to someone who can undo it." Now she had only a few options. The first is to prevent Diego's murder. It might not be easy, but nothing is impossible. If Duke Bertha manages to survive, it will change the future. At least this way it is guaranteed that Cedric and Cecile will stay alive. However, it was necessary to tell the Duke that the lady was mocking them. He must know the truth in order to find a solution to the problem. But it was no use, because her father already knew everything, but Estella saw that the Duke cared about him. Cedric explained that he simply used it to show his brother that when they were alone, he didn't care. He wanted to make him his heir only because he was his mother's son. The Duke deliberately pretended to be a caring father in order to torment Diego. Even if they could survive, would they be happy in such an environment? Another option is to let Duke Bertha die. If the Duke is killed, then there is little chance that Diego will leave the Duchess alive. In that case, there will be real chaos in the estate for some time, and this will be a chance to escape. Although not as rich as now, the children will grow up happily and will have the opportunity to choose their future. However, what about a man who grew up alone and did not receive the attention he deserved? When meeting Diego, Estella bowed, and she said that he would soon need a tie. Diego frowned in surprise and thanked Miss Margaret for her concern. And when he left, he said that he himself decides what to wear. It didn't matter if he didn't listen to her now. She was just giving him a little hint. The only way to prove that she is worthy of dealing with him is the Duke's death. Diego will definitely agree to her proposal, just like when the main character of the original story, Adriana, proposed a contract marriage to him. And she was very sorry to get ahead of her, but nothing could be done. She must save these children at all costs. And he's not going to watch this poor man die alone. He would need a tie, he remembered Estella saying, as if she knew what was going to happen today. Diego asked his accomplice what was wrong with the crowd, and the guy replied that they had moved them to the inner waiting room. I asked if the security had left their post. He replied that the shift time had been changed, so there would be no one here for 30 minutes. If everything was successful, he promised a big reward, and the guy said that failure was out of the question. He addressed him as His Excellency. Diego glanced at him and said that he would go. His Excellency, huh? He probably thought he was coveting his father's title. Father, his memories sounded joyful. Why does someone who may be more important than life to someone become less significant to them than anyone else? It's probably not just his problem. Unlike their relationship with their father, with their mother, they could sincerely tell each other how much they loved each other. So what is the difference between them and ordinary rich people? If things were different, he wouldn't have to come to this place. He opened the gates to the prayer hall, turned to his father. If his father hadn't been so wary, something would have changed. The Duke asked Diego anxiously why he was there. Diego said he had something important to say. The Duke said they could talk about it later and asked his son why he had come. But the father shouted sternly that he could not leave here. Before he left here, Diego wanted to ask something, and at that moment, his father froze in horror. Diego pulled a dagger from his sleeve and asked if he remembered what it was. The Duke shrank. He raised the dagger above his head, and the Duke, remembering, screamed. That evening the bell rang after prayer time and the warm sun shone into the church. And Diego, wiping away the blood, walked along the dimly lit corridors, looking at the floor. But when Diego raised the dagger over the Duke, he tremblingly asked how he knew what it was. So he doesn't recognize her. Then Diego, with a sharp movement, pulled the dagger out of its sheath. And bringing it to his throat, he asked if perhaps he would remember it this way. It seemed that he had dreamed of such a picture. The Duke cursed anxiously to himself, thinking how it was possible not to remember this. After all, he personally handed this dagger to the killer to finish off this degenerate. It's clear from one look that he is convinced that he organized the murder. Not only did it fail, but the customer was also revealed. Damn, what other best swordsman in the South? Diego asked why he was avoiding him. His father nervously answered, "Nothing of the sort." And he asked if he really was going to commit such a terrible crime against his father. "Of course not," Diego answered. "Did he ever treat him like a son?" Diego asked, advancing. The Duke shouted and asked how he dared to speak like that, how he dared to point a dagger at his father. Diego sat closer, and the Duke could no longer run. The man laughed in despair and exclaimed that he knew it would happen. He screamed that he knew he would grow up to be a real devil. That's why he did it. To teach a lesson to a cretin like him, there was nothing left to do but use force. While the Duke laughed nervously, Diego stood up, and raising his dagger, he asked if these were his last words. The Duke trembled with horror. But even in the face of fear of death, he called Diego a damned bastard. This was his end. After the ruthless and cold-blooded murder, Diego looked at his hands, and exhaling, he said that his father still didn't know. That being born from a man like him was his real curse. A predicted death does not have to be trivial. The estate was shocked by the sudden death of Duke Bert, and when the Duchess found out about this, she lost consciousness and, denying reality, could not come to her senses until the funeral preparations were completed. The criminal, who was bribed by Diego, was immediately captured in the temple. He was found in a state of alcoholic intoxication and stated that he had taken advantage of the guard's absence, killed the Duke, and was going to escape. The matter was presented as if it had been done by a commoner who held a grudge against the nobles, and Diego immediately dealt with the work after the Duke's death. The young heir's activities were brilliant and seemed to demonstrate the abilities of the new head of the family. Due to such a sudden death, all the estate workers were involved in preparing the funeral. Naturally, her job was to dress the children in mourning clothes. Estella asked the gentleman if he was okay. "No," he answered sadly. Estella asked him if he was sad, and he wasn't either. It seemed to him as if someone he didn't know had died. He asked how many more nights there would be sadness. Estella explained that it was not necessary. Even a person who left only bad memories could be thought of a little better. Now it was up to the lady to change her clothes, but Cecile didn't want to do that. Estella touched her mistress, trying to calm her down. But Cecile hit the governess on the hand and repeated that she had already said that she did not want to. Estella looked in surprise at the baby, who was on the verge of tears. The girl wondered if this little man had realized that the Duke was dead or if she wanted to pretend that she didn't know. But today was the last chance to say goodbye to his father. Cedric told Estella that everything was fine and they would go together. Sadly, Cecile is still too young. Just like him, Estella noticed with a heaviness in her chest. While calming the baby, the girl told the lady to rest, saying that they would return soon. Soon she ran to the master, and Cedric asked where Cecile was. Estella said that she would rest a little at home. Well, really, she patted him on the head, touched, and she said that sometimes she is so sad that he grew up too early. Cedric was indignant, saying that this was not so, and he was already a full-fledged adult. Margaret was touched by the boy until she noticed the Duchess passing by. The widow indignantly reminded her that she had clearly told her to get out of the estate and muttered something else under her breath. The Duchess seemed to have lost her mind completely, but that is only natural when you suddenly find yourself at your own husband's funeral. It's good that she could take part in this too. This way she can meet Diego, see him, and make a deal to save the children. The father was a reliable man who firmly led the family without neglecting the responsibilities assigned to him. He was a loyal friend to them all and a devoted servant to the imperial family of Mesquita. They won't be able to cope with the loss for a long time, Diego concluded his speech. The inscription on the tombstone read, "In the name of eternal longing for the father, whom they would never meet again." What a nasty bastard, the Duchess thought as she read it. What a pretentious phrase. But suddenly I realized and thought about how a tombstone could be made the day after a person's death, and she said that her husband could not die like that. Diego looked at his stepmother, who was screaming that her husband couldn't do that. Why her husband and not him? She screamed that he had to die. He killed him because he was so blinded by power. Otherwise, the funeral could not have started so quickly. Diego took the Duchess by the hand and said that he understood that she was in shock, but he was also his child, because she can say such terrible things. Looking at him, the Duchess was horrified, seeing the smile on the scoundrel's face. Crying, she screamed loudly, continuing to beat Diego in the chest. The others ordered to quickly stop the Duchess. She knew that the Duchess had a hot temper, but how could one call the heir a murderer? Wasn't it clear that Duchess Bertha and her husband preferred their second son? They asked from the outside. The Marquise stood behind the younger Duke. How could the heir be changed? It was all the Duke's greed. What is the point of appointing a child of low birth as successor? None of them knew that the Cedric they were talking about was here. Estella squeezed his shoulder. Diego said that they were here to say goodbye to his father. He didn't want someone so dear to him to be spoken of so badly. The nobles said they were saying this because the Duchess had treated him so rudely. Diego stepped forward and addressed Cedric. The brother asked if he was okay, and the boy, without looking up, answered in a drawn-out tone, "Yes." I asked where Cecile was, and Estella replied that she had not brought her because she had refused to go, thinking it was too big a blow. Even if the parent is in such a state, what can we say about the children? The elder asked. Margaret had no desire to perform this play he had written, but to stir up this scene she had to take a step forward herself. And she said that the black tie she was talking about ended up being needed by him. Diego tensed up. His heart sank with fear, and he looked at Estella anxiously, after which a grin appeared on his lips. He chuckled and said he thought she had a lot to talk about with the kids. And suggesting that they meet later alone, he walked back, looking back at the girl one last time. Still, it means she was able to attract his attention, and she hoped that their conversation would be successful, but suddenly she noticed a familiar image. This man had been standing there for so long, looking only at Diego, long silver hair and bright blue eyes. That's right, that girl was Adriana, the main character of the novel. She hid in the prayer room, avoiding the annoying maid, and she accidentally witnessed the murder of Duke Bert, and having seen this, she would definitely want to check the actions of the criminal. So what does he plan to do, young Duke? Miss Margaret was 22 years old, he knew, and was well spoken of. Besides being an excellent teacher to the young lady, her good-natured nature also makes her well-liked by the other workers. The Duke asked how she got to the estate. It is said that her family was initially poor due to her father's gambling addiction, but now their situation has improved. It is also worth paying attention to the fact that the Duchess announced her dismissal. She has not left yet, but there is little time left. And it seems she also has a fiancé, he reported, and Diego asked again. They said that he was the second son of Baron Eric, an honest man, and there were rumors that they were very suitable for each other. But he needn't worry. The butler had heard that the engagement was completely broken off. Diego asked why he should care. Isn't this important information? The man asked. Otherwise, why would he dig so deep into it? Okay, why was the engagement broken off? Diego asked. If she needed anything, wouldn't the best way be to turn to her fiancé? They said Miss decided to look for a job and received notice of the engagement being broken off. If this had not happened, the man would have held the wedding. He asked if he was interested in Miss Margaret, and Diego asked irritably why he kept asking him about it. She was a beauty, but Diego had a different image in his head, and he said that her glasses covered half of her face. He agreed that many nobles perceived some governesses as entertainment, but this was not about him. Her job was to teach children. The butler then asked why he had requested an investigation. The Duke looked out the window, looking at the governess, and he quietly said that the girl knew what he did 2 days ago. He interrupted the butler and explained that he now understood why he was interested in her, and he told him now to tell her that he was looking for her. The lady said she liked the apricots, so Estella decided to pick some. It would cheer her up, although she didn't know if she would be happy. But then the butler approached the girl. Estella asked Javier what he was doing there, and the man said that he had come to give her something important. The younger Duke called her to him. Hearing this, the girl tensed up. She expected that they would meet soon, but she did not expect that it would be so soon. Estella asked where she should go, and Javier said he would take her. And he also advised Miss Margaret not to provoke the Duke. He did not want any more unnecessary casualties. So, Estella asked, Duke Bert's death was a necessary sacrifice. Javier asked Miss Margaret if she knew what it was like to live knowing that a member of your family would kill her if she didn't kill him. He came here on orders from the former Marquise of Beautry to visit the Duke's mother, Dolores. It was a marriage concluded for the purpose of uniting two families, a marriage under the pretext of which Duke Bertha terribly deceived Lady Dolores. After Dolores's death, the young Duke often cried, remembering his mother, after which Duke Bertha began to raise his hand against him. Once upon a time, 20 years passed. That's enough for murder. She had no intention of criticizing the young Duke for this, since she knew it. But she did not interfere in any way. She is also an accomplice. But there was no need to kill a child who didn't understand anything. Javier paused and asked if she was trying to save them, and Estella nodded confidently. He understood her and led her to the Duke. When they met and listened to the governess, Diego supported Miss Margaret in some ways. When the butler brought the girl, Diego called Miss Margaret to come in quickly, and he told the girl that he called her because he thought they had something to talk about. Knocking on the table, the young Duke asked her to say what she wanted from him. They said that her negligent father was addicted to gambling, and she was burdened by her younger brothers and sisters. And the mother suffers from depression, a rather unhappy life. So she was eager to become the next Duchess, Diego asked. Estella grimaced and wondered why he had suddenly started talking about the Duchess. The Duke wanted to hear from Miss Margaret how she wanted him to improve this life. Maybe this guy was programmed to marry as soon as the right person came along, she thought. Adjusting her glasses, Estella confirmed that she wanted something from him. Diego listened attentively to the governess's explanations, and the girl confidently asked him that under no circumstances should he kill his younger brother and sister, Cedric and Cecile. Diego looked at the governess in surprise. Diego slept while his sleep was disturbed by the noise around him. Suddenly he heard someone call his name and he jumped out of bed. He let out a shaky breath and thought it was a nightmare. But suddenly Cecile touched his legs, which woke him up. Diego asked in surprise who let her in. The little girl explained that everyone said they were busy and couldn't go, so she came now. Diego was disappointed because he had just gone to bed and asked if the governess hadn't taught her that it was impolite to wake up sleeping people. "It's already morning, why is he sleeping? He needs to be punished for oversleeping," Cecile said. Diego was surprised and thought when she started speaking so well, and then he flicked her. After that, he lay back down and told the little one to go. But the little girl did not lag behind and continued to tell Diego to get up. She tried to pull the blanket off, but Diego kicked her. And then the girl, offended and almost crying, began to mumble something under her breath, scolding her brother. The noise was irritating and kept Diego from sleeping. Cecile reminded him that he had made her a promise but had not kept it. Diego asked irritably what the promise was. And the little girl whined and said that if she brought flowers, he would fulfill her wish. Rolling his eyes, he remembered, that time on the street exactly. He completely forgot about it and asked to tell his sister what she wanted. But when there was no answer, he told her to speak again. She mumbled something but ended up crying because she was being pressured. An explosion of resentment poured out through crying. Diego's ears started bleeding, but he remained silent. When this had been going on for some time, he asked her to tell him where her governess was. At this time, Estella came to Cedric's lesson. The boy asked the governess with displeasure if she was still there, since she had been fired, and he was so ashamed that he shed tears in vain. Estella asked him if he was interested in when she would leave the estate. "Leave?" the boy asked in horror. But then Estella proudly declared that until he learned all the formulas in the world, she would not go anywhere. So she told him to solve the problem quickly. Usually he didn't make so many mistakes. 10 days had already passed since the death of Duke Bert, and she retained her position as governess thanks to the agreement with Diego. So the children would have to see her until they got tired of it. Contrary to her expectations, the children quickly recovered. Some people were worried that Cedric didn't shed a single tear, but she thought otherwise. In this world, it happens that the death of a parent is not at all sad. The Duchess was often absent from the estate, apparently busy trying to prevent Diego from inheriting the title. She still didn't like her presence here, but it was no easy task to drive her out, having teamed up with Diego. The test time was over, but he still had some writing to do, so she asked if he would ask for time during the state exam as well. Managing time was also a skill. Diego agreed with this. He was not going to wait any longer either. The sleepy gentleman wearily brought the struggling Cecile with him. The baby continued to whine, and Diego could no longer listen to this. What a company, Estella asked, since when they had been there. Since she had looked out the window, Diego answered. He needed to talk and asked if he had a minute. Estella said that she would sort this out and come out. The girl asked if he would wait in the next room. Diego handed Cecile over to the governess, and he said he was giving her 5 minutes. Estella asked the gentleman to study himself and asked the lady to play. Cedric asked if she thought the conversation would be long. Estella asked if this was not what he had dreamed of. Cedric said that if she did not come in half an hour, he would leave. Then the teacher announced, if he is not here in half an hour, then he will have to write the test again. That's how they agreed. Cecile asked what it was, in what country they do it by hand. Estella let it slip about modern times, but said abroad. Estella went to Diego looking at the boys, where Cecile wanted to learn this, and her brother taught her this movement. She finished quickly, Diego noticed. Estella asked how long their conversation would take. Diego himself wanted to finish it as quickly as possible, so he asked Miss to sit down. The girl was frightened and wondered where she should sit, but the Duke continued to stare at her. She sat down on the children's chairs because there was no choice, and Diego decided to get straight to the point. He told Miss Margaret that he was good at telling who was on his side and who was not. She is a fairly consistent person, and he previously thought that they could become good partners. If his student hadn't burst into his bedroom this morning, he would have continued to consider it an unfortunate event. The master was with her, and the mistress, how could she come to him if she was so afraid? Estella tried to understand. But in any case, they have already decided that they will sign a contract, so we need to start with its terms. If she had any conscience, she would not have asked him to take responsibility for the children for the rest of his life. He looked very angry, and then Estella asked him to leave her at least until Madame Cecile grew up. Being a governess did not guarantee such a long term of employment, but she was talking about the time she lived on the estate. So her stay here will not be prolonged, and of course, she will keep his secret forever. Diego agreed and said that he would tell them his conditions. They would move the nursery to a separate building. He had no intention of sowing the seeds of discord and sending them out of sight. He no longer wanted to be torn from his sweet sleep. He would send a servant there to avoid such situations, but then Estella said that it was unfair. Diego asked Miss Margaret to repeat it. And then Estella asked him if he knew why she had come to him, and she explained that it was because she thought he would be a better guardian for them than Duke Bertha. He might not like it, but she had a choice. If she went to Duke Bertha, she wouldn't have to beg for the salvation of these two. Then Diego asked if she was demanding to save them, so what was the problem with sending them to another building? If he sends them to a separate place, how will they grow up being treated like that? They can't be allowed to suffer from the gossip of adults. It's better to let them live in a place where no one knows. People are able to quickly sense power. After the Duke's death, the children will become a nuisance to the servants, and they will undoubtedly be hurt by their harshness. He thought it would be better for them to grow up next to him, while others, on the contrary, saw him as a potential enemy. The stereotype that victims of violence will also commit violence was believed in this way in her past life, and not only in her country. But then Estella told the gentleman that the Duchess was abusing the children. And this has been going on for a long time, and all with the Duke's permission. Diego looked at her in amazement. And it is Cecile who suffers the most, she continued, but Cedric is also the object of her anger. For him, this could be a way to get rid of the Duchess. Diego was stunned. He asked for a second, trying to comprehend what was said, because it didn't seem that way to him at all. But if it wasn't him, they would have done it with Cedric. The only reason Duke Bertha cared about him was because he was the Duchess's child. She may have been the one who witnessed them being abused. Perhaps more evidence could be found if others were interviewed. The only thing that supported the Duchess's position in this estate was Duke Bertha and her two children. If Duke Bertha were alive and well, the Duchess's crimes would be hushed up, but after his death, she will not be able to restore her position. He understood the situation and reversed the decision to move the nursery to another building. Estella thanked him for his understanding and asked him to be patient for a little while if she was causing him any inconvenience. Once the two got used to it, she would disappear immediately, but Diego said no, there was no need for that. When he broke the contract, he said he had changed his mind. And constructing something from a strip of paper, he turned to Miss Margaret. While she looked at him, not understanding anything, he put a paper bundle on her finger, and he asked her to marry him. What, she thought, not understanding. Taking the homemade ring off her finger, she said with displeasure that she didn't want to get married. Diego said that he was not proposing now, and she asked what it was then, if not a proposal. A threat, the Duke asked playfully. And more seriously, he asked her if she even understood how difficult it was to find a person who would never betray him. She knows him deep down because she has seen how cruel he can be. And even if he changes a little, she will not change her time. She will be next to him, and he will ensure the safety of the children. She is not an ordinary person, but she never asked him for anything he could not understand. So he thought it would be better to marry someone with whom he had common interests, which was a calculated move. This agreement was the main aspect of this marriage, and Estella understood what he meant, but her answer remained the same. Then Diego asked what the reason was, and the girl thought it was because he would soon fall in love with Adriana. The girl asked him what he would do if, after getting engaged to her, a girl appeared that he liked. And he proudly said that it was impossible, explaining to Miss Margaret that all his life he had tried to live not like his father. Even if he marries her, believing it to be an arranged marriage, he will never betray her by having an affair, he promised. It wasn't that she thought Diego would have an affair with any intent, and it wasn't that she wasn't at all tempted by that tempting request. However, when Diego meets Adriana, he falls in love with her as expected, and their contract is terminated. And she will be kicked out of the estate, forced to leave Cedric and Cecile. But it will be a problem if Diego, in an effort to remain faithful to her, pushes Adriana away. In the novel, the reason Adriana proposed a contract marriage was because her fiancé was a horrible bastard. She had no intention of using the misfortune of others as a springboard for her own happiness. Estella stated that everything would not be as simple as he said, and yet Diego considered their meeting a great success. Perhaps he was also looking for a reason to stop. Estella tensed. He seriously, the girl thought anxiously, could she trust his humanity? Maybe he didn't want to kill his half-brother and sister either. She spoke hesitantly if after they got engaged, he would break off the engagement. Then she will become like a hen with broken eggs? Hen? Diego asked. She explained that this meant that she would be the only one who would suffer and asked how long he intended to continue this ridiculous conversation. But Diego was convinced that she was saying ridiculous things. He wasn't even dating anyone. How could he fall in love? But she couldn't bring Adriana to him right now, or she could. Estella offered to bet the gentleman that in 3 months a beautiful woman would appear, and if after meeting her nothing changes, then they will continue talking about marriage. She spoke as if she were a fortune teller, but Estella suggested calling it a prophecy because it would definitely happen. And if not, Diego asked, coming closer, and the girl tensed up. The guy asked with a grin, what if he doesn't fall in love in 3 months? Then Margaret promised to do whatever he wanted, including marriage. Diego said that he couldn't refuse such an offer, but even if he was so confident in himself, Estella knew something that he did not. That he has a person who is bound to him by fate, as it was destined in the original story. But then Diego stopped and suggested that the girl have lunch together tomorrow. Lunch? Estella asked. They were getting engaged in 3 months, so they needed to get closer. Estella was stunned and reminded him that she had just rejected him. It can't be, Diego said with a grin. He's never been refused by a girl. What a persistent idiot he is, Estella thought. But the next morning the realization of what had happened came, and the girl wondered if he had really gone crazy. He even appears to her in her dreams with marriage proposals, and she could not sleep at all. He was supposed to marry the main character, and he ruined everything. Yesterday she talked to Diego and ended up in such a useless argument. But can she avoid this with food when this happens to children? For sure, children. And already at dinner, Diego, after a pause, irritably asked what it was. The confrontation began, and Diego noticed that it seemed they had no agreement on such a number of participants, but Estella took advantage of this. There was no agreement. Ignoring Diego, Estella turned to the lady and said that her outfit today was simply stunning. Yes, Cecile answered proudly, and boasted that Diego had bought it for her because he had broken his promise. Because, Diego explained, if he makes promises, he always keeps them and asks the teacher to start eating. But how could she know that by bringing children here, she was doomed to failure and wished them bon appetit? But when I tried it, I was surprised at how delicious it was. The foie gras mousse is so tart and buttery, and the bread is crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. What if she chooses him? She will be able to eat such food every day. And Estella said that she will choose him, that she wants to live eating only such food. If you change 3 things, food, clothes, and housing, her life will change dramatically. Her life will be completely different with him. Estella almost agreed, but she froze and said that they still couldn't get married because she wasn't sure enough. What other confidence is needed? Diego asked without understanding, and asked Cedric and Cecile if they wanted Margaret to stay in the estate. The little girl excitedly stood up from her seat and said that she wanted to, and Cedric asked what they were talking about. They were getting married. Diego asked Cedric if he didn't want them to get married and become a family. Estella anxiously told the children that the Duke was just joking, and Cedric asked Estella if it was true. And he awkwardly reported that he also planned to marry her a little later. Estella was touched by the master's proposal. But she immediately realized the truth when he said that Estella would take exams for him and do his homework. The brothers were brothers for a reason. They both wanted to marry just to use her. "What a pity, brother," said the wily Diego. "Everywhere there are rules." Then, Cedric said, he would go to the country of Fernando, where polyamorous relationships are allowed, and become her second husband. Diego told Cedric that this was nonsense. All three had to be from Fernando, or he thought they could change their nationality. But then Estella stopped their debate. She asked him what he was even saying to a child. He couldn't answer so seriously, and Diego asked why she was interested in someone 15 years younger. "Is that even possible?" she asked, and Diego said he would never have thought he would be rejected because of his age. She asked him to stop teasing her, and Diego asked her to marry him again. And he asked Estella if it was true that brothers shouldn't quarrel over a woman. What a childish, shameless fellow, she thought. As soon as the issue with the Duchess is resolved, she will immediately leave. We'll see. After dinner, Cedric turned to Estella and asked if she would really marry her brother. "How can she?" the girl asked discontentedly, and asked the boy not to worry. There was nothing between them. Cedric was convinced that Estella had indeed convinced him. "Okay," the boy agreed with the governess. "At least she can't do it with her brother." The girl asked why he was so harsh today, because he said his brother was amazing, but Cedric said that she didn't need to know. Then Estella suggested that they go for a walk today. Cecile happily agreed, and Cedric was surprised. Yes, she confirmed, and said that she had recently been recommended a pastry shop. The carriage would be waiting outside, so she asked him to get ready and go out, and the boy said that he would quickly. Taking the children out was quite a job. She would suffer all day today and gave Cecile to the maid. Having given everyone their assignments, she also went to get ready, but suddenly she stopped in surprise. In the passage, she met the Duchess, who was looking at her angrily. The next moment, Anna ran towards her, and Estella froze, confused. Coming closer, she grabbed the governess by the hair, and she said angrily, "She probably understands why she is doing this." Anna, going crazy with anger, asked what she had in mind. Last time she thought that she was just a country bumpkin and therefore didn't understand anything, but it turned out that she had warmed a snake in her bosom. Estella tried to resist, telling her mistress that it was a misunderstanding and asking her to let her go. But then Anna threw her to the floor. Gritting her teeth, the Duchess said that she felt sorry for her, so unfortunate, and she backed off and she stabbed her in the back. "What is she up to?" the woman continued to shout. "What motive does she have for hanging around Diego?" She made a mistake because she was distracted by Diego's proposal. It couldn't have reached the Duchess that they had dined together. "And I thought with anxiety that I needed to come to my senses. If you keep looking up to the Duchess, she won't achieve anything." She told the Duchess that for her, Diego and Cedric were the same rightful owners of the estate. Even if she doesn't like it, she has no right to decide who should come in and who should go away, the Duchess chuckled. Now she realized that it was she who had forced upon Cedric that he and that bastard Diego were brothers, but Estella had said that it was she who had separated them. Anna would tell her to shut up, and Estella would ask if children weren't too young to hate someone because of a disagreement between adults. And Mr. Cedric always liked Diego. Anna clenched her fists until they shook. And she asked how dare she look at her like that? She grabbed her by the collar and said angrily, "It seems like she has no bones in her tongue." Estella begged the Duchess to wait, and Anna said that today they would correct this disgusting habit of hers. Frightened, Estella still called for the master and mistress, telling them to close the door and not go outside. But then Anna came up and started pounding on the door with her fist, ordering Cedric to come out. Margaret begged the master not to do it, while Anna asked Cedric if he wanted to see his governess thrown out completely naked. Hearing the teacher's screams, the little girl opened the door and looked out of the room. And I was incredibly scared for the teacher. Running closer, she shouted no, and Estella, trying to get out, asked the little girl not to come closer. Cecile tried to take her mother's hand away from the teacher, calling her bad and demanding that he not touch her. Anna removed her hand from Estella and looked darkly at the little creature, and she screamed that she didn't even notice her mother, raising her leg to strike. Estella rushed towards the student in alarm. And when the little girl finally opened her eyes, she saw that Estella had protected her from her mother's blow. It was painful, incredibly painful, too much even for an adult. And what if it had hit the lady? Anna smiled tiredly at the sight of the governess's haughty look. She probably felt like she had become her mother, teaching her just a few words. Estella protected the little girl. and Margaret told Anna not to even think about hurting this child ever again. She would not allow her to do so. That's arrogance. The Duchess screamed and asked the servants why they were frozen. They couldn't even drag this girl away. But suddenly, a male voice asked what was going on here, and everyone turned around sharply. Diego explained that he had come there because the servants had told him that things did not seem to be going well with them. Then he looked down at his sister and the girl he was proposing to, and he told the Duchess that he thought she should explain herself, and Anna answered proudly, since he had come, she would explain something to him. Pointing her finger down, she said with disgust, "This girl is fired," and told him to find a new governess. Diego said it would be difficult, and Anna, wary, asked what he was planning. They both conspired to throw her out. And putting his arm around Estella's shoulder, he asked the Duchess what she thought. And he explained that if everything she said was true, it meant that she dared to threaten his beloved. Anna chuckled. She was sure that her stepson didn't have such bad taste. "Well, smiling," he answered sarcastically, "that's how he differs from his father." The Duchess looked at her stepson with irritation. Rolling her eyes, the woman thought that she needed to calm down. If she continued to anger him, it would not play into her hands. Diego stood up, and Anna said that in any case she had to make it clear that she had already been fired. "Nothing of the sort," Diego explained. "He is now managing the estate," Anna said with a smile. "She is the mother of these children," and asked if he was going to give them to the governess, of whom she did not approve, and turned to Cecile. Holding out her hand, she ordered the girl to come to her. But the little girl shook her head in fear and only pressed herself closer to the teacher. This made Anna even more furious. Tearing her daughter out of the governess's clutches, she screamed and asked if she understood when she spoke nicely. Estella knocked the baby's hand away by hitting the lady on the hand and calmed Cecile down, saying that everything was fine. She consoled her, and Diego told the Duchess that she now understood who the children needed more, the time when she trusted his father and did something outrageous, so he told her to get out right now. Anna was humiliated by this statement and clenched her teeth, and then she silently left, finally leaving the girl and her daughter alone. Estella applied a cold compress to her cheek. The servant helped her, but the girl asked to pay attention to the mistress, and not to her. Diego approached the bride and asked how she was. They said that the Duchess had a heavy hand. Estella indignantly asked if he could check it himself. She would never miss such an opportunity. But then Diego asked if she could see well without her glasses, so why not take them off? "Why?" asked Estella, explaining that she wore them because she had terrible eyesight. "It's not true," Diego answered, and the girl asked why he thought so. Sitting down next to her, he explained that if her eyesight had not been so good, she would not have been able to protect Cecile. And also, Estella became interested. He didn't know she had such beautiful blue eyes. The girl said embarrassedly, surprisingly he couldn't notice before. "Only," he said tenderly, placing his hand on her shoulder. The shine was completely different. Diego asked why she was so obsessed with those glasses. Maybe she wanted to hide something from him. Estella asked if he suspected her of something. There couldn't be any secrets between them, he said proudly, so she let her say what she really thought. She asked for a ban to be placed on the Duchess so that she could not be allowed to approach the children. Diego tensed up. He didn't even know who was taking care of whom. Estella said that she could hold her own against someone her size, but for the master and mistress it could be a real trauma. She was worried not only about Cecile but also about Cedric. She ran to the gentleman who was cowering in a corner after what happened, and hugging him she calmed him down, saying that everything was okay, it was all over. The boy said, crying, she and Cecile were outside and he was hiding here alone. And he guiltily asked Estella to forgive him. So, to ensure the safety of the children, they must be protected from the Duchess, absolutely. But Diego simply didn't understand. There was no benefit to her in taking such good care of the children, so why did she take care of them as if they were her own? But Stella explained that in her home country, teachers are required to report everything, especially domestic violence. Diego was hearing about this for the first time. Weren't they both from Mesquita? Estella winced and said she meant the local authorities. Without realizing it, she began to talk about how it was in her past life and said that she wanted to convey that those who cover up are also accomplices. Of course, she imagined herself running away, leaving Cecile and Cedric, but knowing everything, she simply could not leave them. Because she wasn't sure that she wouldn't feel guilty for their deaths, but maybe she would. The reason she found a new life in this novel is also because they needed someone to save them from their suffering. She felt a kind of responsibility. Diego asked hesitantly if he were younger. She would take care of him too. Estella put her hand on his cheek. And coming closer, looking into his eyes, she said that she still cares about him. Diego looked at her in shock, and butterflies appeared in his stomach. Realizing what she had done, Estella blushed and thought that she had gone a little too far. But then Diego pressed himself against my hand like a cat and said, "It's so nice that he's about to cry." And at that very moment, Estella's heart began to beat faster. Diego started talking about how he had recently asked what kind of person his mother was. Of course, she didn't look at all like the woman who hit her. Margaret, touched, said that she was glad that this was so. Diego continued, his mother was a strong and strong-willed person. Despite all these terrible humiliations, she never showed this dark side. Among the children, Diego was worried about his mother's cheek. Mother wiped the tears from his eyes and asked Diego not to worry. She said it was to warm his hands. But society evaluates such a noble person by different standards. Estella also remembered Dolores exactly like this. The cruel lines in the book describing Diego's mother, rejected for her ugly appearance. Most of the characteristics were related to appearance, which made people reading these lines neglect it. His mother didn't want him to hate his father, but given the kind of person he was, he had no choice. And Diego confessed to Miss Margaret that she didn't think Mom had simply died of illness. Estella asked why he was telling him such strange things, but Diego himself did not know. Probably because he wanted her, after hearing his excuses, to think that he was better than he was. After this, at her request, the children were separated from the Duchess. Unlike the original, Diego moved the Duchess into a separate building, not the children. One might say that this was too cruel for a woman who had just lost her husband, but for Diego even that was not enough. Diego also listened to the advice and found information regarding the previous governesses who worked at the estate. Governesses who did not receive recommendations were probably unable to remain in the capital and dispersed throughout the country, so it is almost impossible for them to spend their livelihood and go and give evidence. However, her partner has a lot of money, so he will promise to compensate them with a sufficient amount. Diego is not only rich but also handsome. Isn't he too much of a perfect character? And she could see him right before her eyes. And the skin is so soft. But then Cecile asked the teacher what had happened, and Estella jumped up in fear and screamed. Estella asked the lady how long she had been standing there, and Cecile replied that she had just arrived. It's good that she was only thinking to herself. If she had also been muttering, it would have been awkward. Estella asked if she was ready, then they could go look for the master. Cecile agreed. The governess was touched by how happy the mistress was, realizing how much Cecile loved to walk. Cecile also loves desserts. Estella knocked on the door and asked if the master was ready. The boy shouted for her to wait. And then Cedric himself came out and proudly declared that he was ready. He seemed to be looking forward to today's walk and kept looking at his watch. They had been putting off this outing and desserts for too long. The maid whispered to the teacher that the children should not be given too many sweets, otherwise they would not have dinner. Estella promised that she would buy only a small piece. The maid said something about the absence of the Duchess, but her mouth was shut in time. And then the maid told them to be careful, and the carriage was already waiting outside. What kind of family is this, where the mother's imprisonment becomes an opportunity for children to have fun? Still, this is not the most pleasant place for a teacher to work. The only question is, why are they stuck to it when the seats here are so wide? Cedric was fine as it was, and Cecile liked it. It wasn't very far to the city, so the teacher agreed to go that way. But for some reason the gates did not open. It seemed that they had been standing in place for a long time and could not go further. It was not clear what had happened, so Estella called the knight and asked him what was wrong. The boy apologized to the teacher and asked her to wait a little. Estella thought that the gate was broken. Someone was trying very persistently to meet with the younger duke, he reported. They would soon solve everything and open the exit. As she was getting out of the carriage, she asked if she could take a look herself, and the knight allowed her to do so. The man who came here right now, could it really be this? Lady Adriana. Estella turned to Lady Adriana and asked if she was right. The girl confirmed it, but asked warily how she knew her name. Margaret explained that she saw her at the funeral. She was so beautiful that she involuntarily remembered her. If she had revealed her identity right away, she would have passed by long ago. So why is she still standing at the gate? But suddenly she realized that the girl wanted to pass secretly, so that they would not think that it was a secret meeting. But if you think about it, it was a chance to prove the existence of an incredible beauty who would attract Diego's attention. And Estella asked the guard to open the gate, saying that there was nothing to worry about. She said she heard that the younger Duke was expecting a guest, and perhaps he had missed something. The guard opened the gate to let the girl in, and after that, Estella asked him not to tell anyone about it. When a young man and a young girl meet, misunderstandings can arise. The guard understood her. Adriana turned to the girl, thanked her for her help, but asked who she was. Estella explained that she worked there as a governess, and Andrea realized that the children were still in this house. She wanted to say still alive, and this is obvious because she personally witnessed the murder of the Duke. And in fact, if it weren't for her, the children would have already been killed. She said that the younger Duke was currently out in town, but he would be back soon so she could wait in the drawing room. Then Adriana asked her what her name was. She helped her so she would like to remember. And the girl introduced herself as Estella Margaret. Everyone was ordered to disperse, and the Duke's carriage drove into the courtyard. Right now, Estella thought, he must not know that it was she who let Adriana in. Having ordered them to stop, Diego got out of the carriage and, adjusting his hair, told Miss Margaret that he did not think that they would see each other here. And he asked if she had come out to meet him. No, the girl explained, she was going to go to the city with the children. Diego asked to go to the city without his permission, and Estella asked, and she needed it. Diego asked cheerfully if, when going somewhere, you don't need to inform your guardian about it, and if something happens. But the biggest danger to children is him. Estella explained that they were going to go to a pastry shop today, and she wanted to buy them each a piece of cake. Just for them, but what about him? Diego asked, and the teacher asked if he wanted her to wrap one for him too. But suddenly the guard informed the Duke that a guest had arrived to see him. Guest? He asked, looking behind Estella. The girl spoke up and awkwardly greeted the younger Duke, introducing herself as Adriana. Adriana? The Duke asked the guard, the first time he heard why he let her in. Oh, Estella thought. But this was exactly how she had to arrange a meeting between the main characters. This was the only way she could escape from Diego's clutches. Having learned the truth, Diego asked Margaret to explain, and the girl explained that he needed to meet with this man. Diego said he didn't remember making an appointment, but then Estella reminded them that they had agreed, saying 3 months. Diego remembered the girl's prediction, and he thought, judging by those words, this was the beauty who would appear before him. If you go with the flow, there will be no reproaches, he exhaled, and the girl shuddered. He played along with the girls and asked Adriana's last name. The girl answered, Adriana Teresa Asquez, she has poor health. That's why she doesn't go out in public. During the conversation, they agreed to talk in more detail inside, and Estella breathed a sigh of relief. Although not everything went smoothly, it seems that we managed to arrange a meeting, as in the original. Turning around, Diego said that he would return. And they will look. With these words, he walked on as if in a fog. Why did he say such strange things and leave? Estella thought, and the children continued to call her. Finally, they set off, and Estella thought that Diego would accept Adriana's proposal anyway and hoped that everything would be okay. Estella put Cedric to bed and left the bedroom. Making her way to her room, she hid in the corners, and now her room was already approaching. Luckily, they didn't meet Diego, and it was no accident that she returned home at sunset. Closing the door, she exhaled nervously. In any case, she managed to survive this today. What to survive? Diego predicted, who was already waiting for her in the room. Estella screamed in fear. He scared her, but Diego felt like his eardrums were even more scared. The guy said that he thought that if he showed himself right away, she would be very scared, so he spoke up first. He was trying to be kind, and she asked how he could walk into a grown woman's room like that. He should certainly know this as a junior Duke. Exhaling, Diego asked if she was avoiding him, which was considered impolite, and said he would remember it. She asked when this happened. Diego reminded her that she said she would come to see him when she returned. In that case, you should have come earlier, Estella began to explain, but suddenly turned her gaze. But then, in horror, she asked the guy to tell her if he had taken something from her table while looking at his book. Diego rolled his eyes and said, "It's not like it's a diary or anything." Estella said worriedly that she doesn't write diaries at all. Thank God the book was about teaching children, and fortunately it wasn't a romance novel kept deep in a desk drawer. Exhaling, Estella asked what he wanted to say. Diego had a lot of questions. First of all, who is this woman? Estella asked if she hadn't introduced herself as Lady Adriana. Diego asked if she had known her from the beginning. She explained that she had seen her at the Duke's funeral and remembered her because she was very beautiful. It felt like she was being interrogated. Diego asked the second question, why she let her into the estate. She knew that she was one of the aristocrats because she saw her among the mourners, and she spoke sincerely. So she thought he could talk to her once. Diego asked why she said there was a meeting. Estella admitted that she lied to the guard that they had arranged a meeting. It was improvisation. A rather interesting situation happened today, he explained, and Estella asked what happened. And Diego explained that this girl proposed to him. She said that she knew the truth about her father's death and offered to marry her in exchange for silence. I asked her. She told her this. Damn, the girl thought. Diego might think she was conspiring with Adriana. At such moments you need to speak calmly, and she explained, no, asked if she said her name. Diego asked if there was a connection between them. The answer was negative. She said that today she saw her for the first time. Estella explained that she had only seen her from afar at the funeral, so that left one last question. Should he marry her or not? The girl was stunned and wondered why he was asking her such a thing. It is worth it, she answered. She will become his companion for life, Diego asked. Is this her answer? He asked if this meant that she was offering him to share a bed with a blackmailer. Estella wondered if he had ever said such sensible things in the novel, or if she couldn't remember because she had only read the bed scenes. It was strange to call her a blackmailer. Wasn't her beauty to his taste? Diego replied, absolutely not. No, she asked. His heart was probably beating so hard, but that was absolutely not the case. In any case, he remembered. And he told the girl that he came today because he wanted to believe her. He doesn't usually do this. If it was like usual, he would have kicked her out as soon as he suspected something. And she'd better stop reading the books at the bottom of the drawer, in which everything begins and ends with love affairs, Diego advised. At the bottom of the box? Oh no. The girl asked, embarrassed, why he was touching other people's things. Diego was supposed to conduct a minimal inspection. In any case, there was no need to deceive him, and asked Miss to make it so that he could trust her no matter what. Please, he asked her and left the room. Estella was embarrassed, but even so, she said that she would not believe him. Long time no see, said the man Diego. They couldn't even see him at the funeral. In front of the young duke sat his uncle, the younger brother of the current Marquis of Bawtry, Viscount Bawtry. That's right, he didn't attend the funeral, so he thought they wouldn't meet anytime soon. The Viscount said he was sorry, citing ill health. The younger uncle was one of the traitors Margaret had told him about. According to the investigation, he became addicted to gambling and squandered the family budget. It even got to the point of drugs in his childhood. He was a decent person, but now he's just pathetic. Anyway, Uncle came today because he had something to say. He said there were rumors that he had sent the Duchess to a separate building. There are a lot of eyes on him. If he treats a woman who just lost her husband like that, the public will react negatively. Diego thought he had only heard half of the rumors and asked if he knew why he had locked her there. The Viscount had heard that when raising children, it was inevitable that corporal punishment would sometimes have to be resorted to. When Mother hit the governess, Cecile blocked her path and hit her with her little hands. The Viscount asked if it was true. How dare she hit her mother? It was simply unacceptable. Corporal punishment from parents is discipline, but when a child rebels, it is unacceptable. These are generally accepted norms. The rules were not written from the children's point of view. Diego turned to his uncle and he shuddered. He asked the man what he thought was more painful, a punch from Cecile or a kick from an adult. The Duchess continued to beat her children and even mocked the teacher who told him about it and asked for help. Diego could no longer just watch this, so he had to isolate the Duchess from the children. He couldn't bear to watch his younger brother and sister suffer, and he thought his uncle understood how he felt. Uncle asked Diego if he felt any warmth towards these children. Of course, he won't understand if I put it differently. The children are just standing in his way. He knew that the Duchess had told her confidants about the strange circumstances of the Duke's death and about the outstanding abilities of her son. The rumor reached the imperial palace, and the emperor's mistress, who was close to the Duchess, brought this news directly on the sheets. It seemed that this was why the inheritance process was being delayed. If he had not heard everything from Margaret, he would also have considered her advice wise. He had been secretly collaborating with the ducal couple all this time, and obviously, he is now ready to do anything just to get money for drugs from the Duchess. Even now, he was trying to manipulate his reputation to lift the ban on using the money. It's probably better to be a half-breed than to be completely uninvolved, and hearing such words makes you wonder if family even matters. "No, Uncle," Diego asked. The man just coughed awkwardly, not the best reaction. Uncle Yig can say for sure that he would never do anything that could harm him because he is his nephew. "Of course," Diego answered. He has no doubt, but he reported that he also knew of one rumor. Rumor has it that he is currently experiencing financial difficulties and has opened a chest of jewels. When his father died, he began to regret very much what he was like and therefore will try for him as long as he lives. The Duchess's wealth will soon run out. If he gives this man the money, it is clear where it will go. Even though it's a waste, at least he won't have to get his hands dirty. Let him continue using drugs and bringing his death closer. Uncle said that he can't even say anything about his father. He's just very sorry. Diego had to get over it quickly and suggested finishing for today. His uncle readily agreed. If this is not enough, he can tell him at any time. For him, he is like a father, so he is obliged to take care of him. The man laughed contentedly and asked when he had managed to grow up so much. Diego, grinning, asked his uncle to enjoy himself, but only in a way that would not harm his health. Adriana's life is tragic, and in the original novel, her past was also quite chaotic. There were few differences between Diego's and Adriana's childhoods. Marquis Asquez was Adriana's biological father and loved his legal wife. But the house, where only laughter had previously been heard, was suddenly overshadowed by the Marquise's death while giving birth to Adriana. The Marquis hated Adriana, who killed her mother at birth, and completely ignored her. After he got a new wife, his relationship with his daughter was completely ruined. Adriana was the rightful heir, but found herself in a bad position. As she grew older, Adriana faced another problem, a marriage contract with Grant III, the ruler of the Kingdom of Mirabel. This might seem like a pretty good offer, but the problem was that old Grant already had 8 wives. The old king's 9th wife, yes, she too would rather jump into the den of the tiger named Diego. After their contract marriage, Diego and Adriana developed a sense of kinship and compassion for each other. And in the end, they fell in love with each other, and that was the plot of the contract marriage with the dangerous Duke. Now that the two main characters have met, more attention should have been paid to the original story. But suddenly there was a knock at the door. The girl asked in surprise who was there, and Javier met her. He came to deliver a letter for her. "A letter?" Estella asked, strangely, since she had not expected anything. But she froze, worried, and wondered why exactly now a letter from Lady Adriana had arrived. She wrote to Miss Margaret, and last time she managed to avoid trouble thanks to her. She helped her, but she couldn't even introduce herself properly because she was in a hurry. If it's not too much trouble, she would like to meet her to express her gratitude. She wondered if they could meet tonight at the place indicated on the ticket in the envelope. Instead of meeting in a restaurant or some back alley, she chose the opera, a rather unexpected place. Estella asked Javier if he had anything else to say, and the butler said that Mr. Diego was calling her. Well, there was no way that this letter had escaped Diego's notice. Sighing, she asked where she should go, and Javier directed the girl to the training ground. While practicing shooting, Diego hit the target right on target. But when he heard the claps, he looked at the source of the sound. Estella clapped her hands, saying he had hit the target, and Diego asked if she had seen it. It was an amazing sight. Diego said that it was a very rare thing in the capital, so it was probably the first time she had seen something like this. And he asked if she wanted to hold it. Estella refused. She is an ordinary citizen of the country. It is better not to give weapons to just anyone. "This thing is not even worth the sword on a knight's belt," the guy said. "You can't kill someone with it in secret from everyone and escape. And it's very difficult to use in the rain. War doesn't happen only in good weather, so you always need to improve things." Dropping the weapon on the floor, he raised his hands. And he said that he was not going to use it on a living person. Estella froze in surprise, and exhaling, she said that in any case they told her that he called her. Diego heard that she was going to leave, and of course Estella asked he knew with whom. He asked if this was the blackmailer. Estella could not say that he was right, however, such words would sound strange. The Duke asked where they were going, and Margaret asked if she needed to report such things to him. Diego asked if he shouldn't know where she was going to decide whether to let her go or not. She asked why permission was needed at all, and Diego felt offended that she was reacting this way to his human concern. The girl sighed heavily, and Diego realized that he would now find out the answer. The governess said that Lady Adriana had sent her tickets for the opera, so she was going to the big theater on Cashew Street. "What kind of date plan is this?" Diego asked, for it was the first time Estella had received such a kind invitation. "And she will go?" Diego asked innocently. He thought that she was on his side. The girl explained that it was not connected in any way. "If she decides to go, then let her tell her that he is going to marry her, Margaret. Then the atmosphere between them will be wonderful." The girl asked him not to say such strange things on the sly, and asked what he was going to do with Lady Adriana. And in response to his question, she explained that she meant a marriage proposal. "He proposed to her, so why should he marry another girl?" Diego asked. "This definitely means refusal." The fact that Adriana proposed to him is strictly their personal business. She understands that she has no right to interfere and argue. However, because of her, Adriana will face troubles. Because she will have to marry the old king, Adriana had the right to take back her future. If she doesn't tell him about her past life and the novel she read, Diego will never be able to understand this sense of duty. She told the Duke that, as she had already said, she would only marry a man she liked. And he was not her type at all. Estella did not think that he would understand correctly if she said so. But then Diego looked up awkwardly and asked if he was saying that he had never been dumped by a woman. He looked even more embarrassed now than she thought, Estella thought. Looking at the dissatisfied face of this handsome man, for some reason the switch of Estella's dark desires was triggered. She laughed cheerfully and told Diego what a coincidence. This was her first time turning down a man, too. The girl at least once in her life wanted to make a handsome man cry. After a pause, Diego asked, "For the first time?" She confirmed this when she lived in her hometown. There was a moment when she could not refuse an uncle, 16 years older than her. There was also a glutton who would even take her portion to stuff into his mouth. She had no luck with men. Friends always ask her why she only dates men like that, so she decided to abstain for a few years. And she also remembered a man. But then Diego interrupted her and hung over her. So she met with a pig that devoured everything and talked with an old man who was 16 years older. But of all people, she rejects only him. "Why?" Diego asked, trying to figure out the reason for this. Well, coming here was easier than she thought. Perhaps her words came as a shock to Diego. Before, he acted as if he would never let her go. Estella never thought that would happen. And this request for the content of the letter from Adriana. But why should she do this at all? Noticing Margaret, Adriana called her over. She was already sitting, taking her seats on the balcony. Sitting down, Estella asked if she was late. Adriana said no and thanked her for coming. She invited her to such a beautiful place. Estella was grateful. Adriana apologized for the sudden invitation and said that she was keeping their meeting a secret. She didn't want anyone to know who she was dating. That's why she invited her to this place. It is often visited by couples, because here you can't see others. Estella laughed that it looked like a secret date, but she asked Adrian laughingly, "The opera has begun." Estella watched her with enthusiasm, but then Adriana admitted that she thought she wouldn't come. She didn't want to burden her, but she was looking forward to this day so much that she decided on this adventure. Awkwardly, she asked if she knew why she had come to the Duke's house last time. "I know," the teacher answered. She heard that she proposed to the Duke. Adriana was about to get married, a common problem for noble ladies of her age. Besides, she is determined to get married. Even if it is to a man twice her age, she will be grateful. Even if she is the fifth wife, he is rumored to have beaten his wife. As she probably guessed, she was talking about Granton III. Estella asked if he wasn't almost 70. This was so because she was still young. Her father could choose her future husband for her. That's why she needs someone who will protect her, even though it hurts her pride. It's hardly worse than living in a country whose language she doesn't understand. Today she spent a lot of money to buy tickets to the opera. Although she is the daughter of a marquis, she has little money. She is poor and not famous. She knows that her request is too impudent, but she had no choice. So she begged Miss Margaret to let her meet the young Duke. Adriana laid her cards on the table. Her weight in society as the daughter of a marquis was quite significant, because her family scared her with just their name, and now Adriana wasn't ordering, but sincerely asking. Estella hesitated to answer. She was not sure if she could do everything possible to save her from this misfortune. Adriana thanked Miss Margaret and said that she could not repay her in any way for now. Estella reassured her by telling her that everything was fine and that she wasn't asking for anything in return, but she felt awkward about it. But Adriana realized that she was not doing this out of pity and thanked her. To be honest, she didn't know how to make Diego change his mind. She didn't have a single idea. As in any performance, something wonderful could happen to the main character. And if fate exists, then maybe there is a chance that everything will work out. Diego was busy reading a book, but his thoughts were not at all occupied with the story. I remembered the conversation, how she had already said that she would marry the man she liked. She never said anything like that, but Diego imagined that he wasn't her type and that she would rather have a pig or an old man. And this infuriated Diego. "Damn!" he swore. He wanted to say that he was not her type, but he knew. He knew that he was her type. But the more I thought about it, the more absurd the situation became. Well, it wasn't worth thinking about it. But now any movement irritated him. Cecile was standing around the corner, telling her brother to look at how beautiful it was. "What does she need?" Diego asked. He thought they had already decided everything with her. And the little girl, enchanted, asked Diego if he liked the teacher. Not understanding, Diego looked at his sister and asked what this meant. The little girl's face was anticipating the answer. And fearing these sparks, he irritably answered, "No." "Yes," Cecile exclaimed in disbelief. Diego repeated that no, but his sister was convinced that he liked her. Diego was taken aback, and Cecile asked why he had proposed to her if he didn't like her. "He doesn't love her, but he'll marry her," reasoned the little sister. Diego explained that this also happens. This is an adult matter, and she doesn't need to know about it. That's exactly why he simply needs to get married, otherwise she's not even his type. First of all, these eyelashes. Although they are so thick that they start to curl inward, and it even becomes painful. A sharp nose or scarlet lips. Why even have such beautiful respiratory and speech organs? Hitting himself on the head with his fist, he thought, "Damn, what is he even thinking about?" Seemingly clouded from not having slept for several days, Cecile asked Diego if he had gone crazy. In any case, the brother said, she didn't need to think about it. Her teacher was a very useful person for him. The sister asked in horror, "So he was using her?" Diego asked, "Did this have anything to do with her?" The sister said that she would tell the teacher not to marry him because he was cheating on her. Diego was amazed that she was not at all embarrassed to say something like that. The guy thought about it, and he pressed hard on his sister's forehead. While his sister didn't understand what had happened, Diego told her to go. He needed to go to bed. Unlike her, he was very tired. But even when the brother lay down, the little sister did not leave him alone. She asked what if she could help, and Diego became interested and asked what and how she could help with. The little girl told her brother to listen to her and made a gesture with the words, "He has a lot of this." "She is close with the teacher," Diego asked, "so she wants to help her see the positive in him." "That's exactly it," Cecile confirmed. Diego asked with displeasure if he couldn't just help out of good intentions, and Cecile asked if he had no conscience at all. The Duke asked the little girl to tell him where she learned such words. "The teacher taught her," Cecile answered. Javier knocked on the door and announced that a guest had arrived. Diego looked at his watch, and indeed, the time had come. The butler asked whether he should be asked to wait. Diego replied, "No, how could one make a guest wait?" But then Diego saw that the young lady was also here. Javier stroked the baby's head, but she didn't like it. Embracing his sister, Diego informed the butler that it was forbidden to ruffle children's heads without asking. The man agreed that the Duke was right and said that he had behaved incorrectly. Cecile followed him, and Diego asked where she was going. The little girl answered, "With him," and she asked Diego to quickly give her his hand, which amused Javier. But the guy resigned himself and extended his hand to the little girl. And taking his hand, Cecile laughed embarrassedly and contentedly. Finally, they arrived to the already waiting guest. Diego looked at him sternly, and Cecile was surprised, and then the guy asked if, while they hadn't seen each other, he had become a nanny. He probably also goes to grooming classes. Diego explained that he is already at the age when it is time to get married, so this is not so bad. The boy called out to his friend in surprise and asked if they hadn't decided to grow old and die alone. Diego asked with displeasure, if he did not marry, then what would happen to the succession to the throne in this country? The guy laughed and simply asked them to wait. His father was still in great shape, and he was about to give them his late offspring. And then he asked if this was his little sister. Diego told Cecile to say hello. He introduced the guy in the robe as the prince of their country, thanks to whom a bright future awaits them. "Prince?" the little girl asked in surprise. And she said, "Prince," but somehow sloppy. Diego couldn't hold back his laughter, and the prince was stunned by such a statement. "Sloppy?" he asked the prince, and Diego explained, "It seems she says he doesn't look very good." The prince irritably asked for a repeat. "It's still not very good. If she doesn't understand what sloppy means, he will personally help her figure it out." The prince was brilliant in appearance, but Cecile didn't care, and raising an eyebrow, she thoughtfully said that she was not talking about him, but about his star fever. Her brother couldn't help but laugh again at Cecile's statement, and the prince asked in disappointment, "What?" Thus Prince Lionel Ewald was humiliated by a 5-year-old child, and his old friend laughed at him openly. Holding back his irritation, he exhaled and said that children talk about all sorts of things, and that was why he didn't want to have children. Lionel asked if she could even know that he was dating him, and what if she told the Duchess everything. Diego chuckled and said, "She's not like that. She has a special connection with her biological mother." The prince asked why they could talk in front of her, and Diego explained that he was still at that age that she wouldn't understand anyway. "If only she were the first," Diego said with a sigh, and the prince reminded him that he was the first in this house. Seeing the confusion on his friend's face, Lionel asked if he was a fool. Diego understood what his friend was talking about and looked at his enchanted sister with embarrassment. He waved it off and asked him not to talk nonsense. And he told his sister that now the adults would be talking about their own things, pushing her towards the exit. He told her to go play, leading her to Javier. And as she said goodbye, she waved her hand to the prince with star fever, saying that they would see each other again. When Cecile finally left, Lionel exhaled and said, whatever it was, he had heard about his exploits. Finally, he sent his stepmother into a cold corner and congratulated her on the fulfillment of her dream. But Diego knew that she would definitely return someday. But they had a new problem. What? Lionel asked, humming. Was the problem with his title again? No, Diego explained. This time it was about his stepmother. The prince sighed sadly and reminded him that he had already told him that she was not his mother, but for Diego, it did not matter. Then the prince irritably explained that firstly, she did not marry his father. She was simply his favorite concubine. The feelings of the pack are more serious, and she even became a countess, remind Diego. Lionel screamed, how it infuriated him. Well, the important thing was that their duchess and his duchess were close, he concluded. The fact that he still hasn't received the title is also the fault of these two. Lionel asked what he was going to do. His father was going blind because of love and was ready to fulfill any woman's desire. So Diego should take care of this because of his family he suffered, but Lionel could also say something about his family. What else did he want him to fulfill his strange requests? And Diego asked, but isn't that the plus of being the prince's sandbox friend? Lionel scratched his nose and grinned, reminding him that he hadn't played with him at all back then. And he asked why he was pretending to be his friend. Diego rolled his eyes and said that there was no such thing. But he was not empty-handed either. He learned about the Countess's weak spot. Weak spot? What is it? The prince asked with interest. Diego said he would tell if he dealt with her for him, and after thinking about it, Lionel agreed. It was simple, and Diego said, the Countess is cheating. The prince asked why, and that's all. He asked his friend if he really thought he didn't know about her passion for waking up in a new man's bed. But then Diego explained that this time everything was not so simple. It was Deputy Minister Delmar. The prince immediately jumped up and asked if he was sure about this. Diego said that they kept their relationship a strict secret. He himself found out about this while he was conducting an investigation into the Duchess, and now that was interesting. She probably knows that Delmar and his father are old enemies, and because the king was not interested in the throne, his son lost his place. Lionel explained that because they had the same taste in women, there had been plenty of skirmishes and why people were so drawn to forbidden relationships. And what if she was leaking information about the royal family? This can be found out as we go along. The mere fact that they see each other will have a major impact on her reputation. And he had one more request? Lionel asked irritably. What else? A piece of cake compared to the previous one, Diego explained. The eldest daughter of the Marquis of Assisi, Adriana Assisi, he needs information about her. At that moment, Adriana was telling Estella that in a week there would be a ball at the royal palace. The state guest, Grant III, will be present at this event. Her father wanted to introduce her to him at the ball. and she asked if she could arrange a meeting with the Duke so they could talk, just once. Adriana was afraid that if not at the ball, she would not have another opportunity. But then Margaret sadly asked, "What if she doesn't succeed?" "But if she doesn't succeed," Adriana said nervously, "then this is her destiny." Estella couldn't come to terms with this. Why was everything so complicated? She just wanted to save the children, and now the main character is being sold because of her fault. Adriana can't get married this way. She needs to cancel the ball at all costs. What should we do? The governess wondered. But then Diego came up to her from behind and asked if there was a problem, and Margaret got scared. Estella looked at the Duke's handsome face, enchanted, admiring him without words. Later, she said that there were many things she wanted to tell the guys, so she couldn't help but sigh. Diego asked if she was sure it was the children. Estella asked what other concerns she might have besides the children. And at the same time, I thought the way he sits on a child's chair with such a body looks funny. But then Diego asked if she found time for herself. "Yes, everything is fine," she answered. And then the guy asked what she had talked about with that girl. She answered nothing special. They just talked about nothing and watched the performance together. The Duke asked what plays were on, The Curse of the Clock Tower, but Estella remembered that she had to send him to the ball. Or Lola's Red Shoes, asked about Diego's opera. To begin with, she should have behaved naturally. "That's right," she happily confirmed. "The girl sings so beautifully and they talk about love there." Diego grinned thoughtfully. And when he asked about the same love as in those novels in her closet, Margaret shuddered. And she asked irritably whether she would remind him of this, but Diego was simply telling the truth. He said that for some reason all the heroes in the books she read had the nickname Bad Guy. Estella tensed up. Considering that most women look for their ideal in stories, doesn't that mean he's pretty much it? "Her ideal?" he asked. Not at all. She wanted to say so, but she couldn't. Anyway, the play is very interesting, and the main character is a real gentleman. And she also heard from the lady that there will be a royal ball in a week. She is very busy with preparations. "I see," Diego answered disinterestedly. Estella asked if he was going to take part in the celebration. "No," the Duke replied. "He doesn't even have a partner, so why does he need this?" he asked. And he also arranged a meeting with Lionel, so it won't work out anyway. She asked if he really needed a partner to go there. As far as she knew, he didn't have any close female friends. Diego asked, since when she was interested in his personal life. Not at all. Estella respected people's personal boundaries. Then Diego asked her to simply admit that she was interested in him. Then he can trust her. Estella looked at the Duke, but could hardly utter a word. She said awkwardly and quietly that she was very interested in the Duke's personality. Diego did not hear. He asked what she was saying, and Margaret exclaimed sheepishly that she was very interested in him. "I would have said so right away, but he still won't go to the ball," the Duke explained, and the girl was surprised. She indignantly asked why, and Diego explained that not much time had passed since his father's funeral, and if he showed up there, people would be interested, and that irritated him. But if he came with someone, maybe people wouldn't start bombarding him with questions. And he said before Estella that he was not going to go there with Miss Adriana. Diego hated feeling lonely in places like this. He had already grown up all alone. Margaret was moved by his sad fate. And remembering the agreement with Adriana, she asked what if she went with him. The guy mockingly asked if she was asking him out on a date. "He doesn't want to, and he doesn't need to," the girl exclaimed. But Diego didn't say that he didn't want to. But the Duke had another problem. "What else?" she asked discontentedly. To be honest, Diego didn't know how to dance, but he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of people. "What should we do, teacher?" he asked. Already sitting in the carriage with Diego, she thought about how everything had turned out this way. Because he was being capricious, I had to agree to dance lessons. And now she was going to choose clothes for the ball. Although she was dressed comfortably, she asked if she could just wear some dress. Diego asked her not to say anything stupid if she was with him. Then the next morning, everyone would only talk about what she was wearing. But even so, she didn't understand the reason. Why dress up like that? Estella asked her to repeat again what he would answer when asked at the ball who she was. A poor beggar girl whom he brought there because he felt sorry for the teacher who was unable to debut in the high world. And he asked if she was satisfied. Estella gave a score of 100 points for what she had learned. And Diego explained with displeasure that she was putting herself in a very humiliating position. This, Estella explained, was to prevent all those strange rumors that might start. Diego couldn't wait to see what kind of strange man she would bring if he left her alone. These conversations about novels, they are not candy, and he continues to suck them, but soon they arrived. Now Diego asked her to take his hand and go out. Estella was surprised and said with embarrassment that at such moments he really did look like a gentleman. Diego asked if she was going to get out, and the girl preferred to postpone the pleasantries for later. Margaret continued to ignore Diego, looking at the beautiful clothing pavilions. Diego led the girl into the boutique, and the saleswoman greeted the gentleman. They prepared tea, fruit juice, and water for the guests, and asked them what drink they preferred. Diego asked Miss Margaret to choose, and she, finally distracted from her studies, asked for water. Diego asked why she was so worried, and Estella replied that it was the first time she had come to such a place. Then the fashion designer approached them and enthusiastically suggested that they had probably been waiting for too long. The woman said that she had been working hard in the workshop and had only just heard that they had arrived and apologized for keeping them waiting. There were a lot of orders due to some ball, and she asked the Duke what he wanted to order from them. Diego asked her to do everything possible to make this girl shine at the ball. Gloves, dress, shoes, accessories, everything. You need to prepare the outfit within a week. A week means everything has to be ready at least 3 hours before the start of the ball, and he asked if this was possible. The woman was ready to try. She had fair skin, so she thought a bright dress would suit her, and she would look especially elegant in white. Although primary colors would look good too, or how about matching the dress to the younger Duke's hair color? Diego found the idea appealing, but Estella thought white would be perfect. The Duke rolled his eyes. Off-the-shoulder dresses were popular right now. She has a small face, so a bigger neckline would look good. After making a sketch, she asked Miss which she liked best. Estella pointed to the option she liked. It was the best, but it looked complicated. But the girl said that she would bring the dresses so that she could evaluate them, so that she could try them on and decide which would suit her. While they were preparing everything, Margaret was offered to look at other things. The accessories looked incredibly beautiful, but very expensive. The girl asked her to tell her when she looked at everything, they had many other products to choose from. Everything was so beautiful, but out of all the variety, the necklace caught my eye. The girl, grasping it on the fly, offered to try it on. They persuaded her to try everything on, and it was clear from Estella's face how much she liked everything. Diego asked if she liked it. He asked to buy it, and then Margaret was overcome with rage. And she said, as expected, I guess that's why she's not the main character, and Diego asked what that meant. And she explained that usually the main characters in novels refuse such gifts, but she thought she could marry a man who would buy her something like that. True, Diego asked with interest and proposed to marry her. Still, he was serious about suggesting it. Estella was surprised by this outcome of the conversation. And laughing, she noticed his subtle sense of humor. Diego rolled his eyes and asked if she thought so. But the Duke explained that he was not joking, because he really could have bought all this for her, starting from there and ending with what is here. He threatened to buy everything, leaving the girl in horror. But then the fashion designer came up and brought dresses. The Duke didn't stop there and offered to try them all on, and the woman agreed. Estella, in horror, asked them to stop, asking if it was true there were about 100 of them there. Yes, some problems, Diego asked, and Estella realized, as expected, she was not the main character. Margaret went to try on dresses, and Diego looked at the catalog. Estella awkwardly called out to the Duke and asked if he would take a look. Diego was embarrassed when he saw the girl. 40 minutes ago, the girl told the lady that in order to tie a corset, you need to maintain good posture. Soon they finally finished, and Estella asked tiredly how much was left. Probably more than she had already tried on. Margaret was horrified. Yes, she is definitely not cut out for the leading role of a heroine. Madame Lola was informed that the next dress was ready. Estella stepped forward modestly. This dress is worn without an underskirt, so the fit is very important, and it has a really great plot. Lola asked if she did any exercises. Yes, Estella answered. She raises the children. Anyway, the dress fits perfectly, and she offered to show her to the dressing table. To do makeup, she asked. Is it necessary to go in so lightly? No, Lola answered. There is a huge difference. And usually she does her own makeup, but they will provide a special service for her. Lola asked the lady to take off her glasses first. Margaret felt embarrassed that she was paying so much attention to her. But what about it, Lola asked. She is their precious guest. The woman asked if she knew how weak men are to unexpected surprises. Imagine that you were looking at one girl and a completely different one appears. and at the moment when glances meet. That's when the real magic begins, she said dreamily. But then Margaret hastened to stop Madame Lola and said that she and the Duke did not have such a relationship. She works as a governess in Bert's family, and since she has never had experience in high society, the gentleman showed his kindness. Her words are naive. No man would be so kind to a girl he is not interested in. I asked her if she knew how many different stories you could hear if you spent time in a boring workshop. She had never heard of this cold-blooded gentleman bringing a girl to a dress boutique. After all, they were in the capital. Estella asked if he had noticed a country bumpkin like her, and Lola asked if country girls were forbidden to dream of love. Now let him look and understand that she is simply beautiful. Estella was amazed and wondered why the heroes of novels at such moments wonder if this is really happening to them. "Okay, now let's get out," said Lola. If everything went well, the girl asked her not to forget to come back for another dress. And suddenly, Margaret began to wonder, embarrassed, whether she was really going to show herself to Diego in this form. It's all so strange, even though she originally intended to show him the dress. So there was nothing strange about it, and she awkwardly called out to the Duke. Diego's heart immediately began to beat faster, and Estella, embarrassed, asked if he would look at her. She thought it was too much. Diego was completely amazed by her, and Margaret, unable to wait any longer for a reaction, asked if he would remain silent. Diego came to his senses. Diego said that he was starting to worry after seeing it in person, and the girl asked him what he was talking about. He didn't know if he could go to the ball with her, not understanding Estella asking why. Maybe she looked strange. But still, this fabric is very good, they say, straight from the East, and a lot of fabric was used for the hem. And Diego tucked her hair behind her ear. And he said, enchanted, that she had something on her lips. "It's cosmetics," Miss said anxiously. And the Duke realized that this was the work of Madame. Lola proudly asked the Duke how he liked her work. And Diego thoughtfully said that it was a little tight in the waist. And as if he had been looking for a pretext for a long time, he touched Estella. And hugging the girl to himself, he said that they would take this dress. It suited her very well. The ride back was awkward, and Margaret began the conversation with what the Duke was holding in his hands. After clearing her throat, she asked what it was and whether he had taken it with him on purpose. Diego replied with displeasure that it was not his, and Margaret noted that it did not look like hers either. But suddenly, it seemed, she figured it out. And I asked Diego if maybe it was for children. Seeing the Duke's confusion, she exclaimed enthusiastically, "Oh my God," and asked if it was true. Diego said that when he is with her, he feels like he is being re-educated. "They are re-educating him," the girl laughed. He spoke as if he were some kind of criminal and really a murderer. But suddenly Estella realized that he really was a criminal. And clearing her throat, she exclaimed, "In any case, he is a good person. He could have treated both the children and her badly, but he didn't." After some thought, Diego asked if it wasn't hard for her to work as a governess. Of course, sometimes she was upset when the master created trouble, but she was more worried that the mistress would not fall somewhere. However, they are both quite obedient, so it is not that hard for her. But then the Duke asked what would have happened if her father had not gone bankrupt. Margaret didn't even know, on the contrary. She was even glad that everything was turning out this way. She thought that the life of an ordinary aristocrat would be very boring. And she was proud of her profession. People become lazy if they don't work, and is there such a thing as dirty work? Well, or unworthy, they are all just doing the best they can. Diego grinned and asked if she knew. And he explained that Miss Margaret, she is a boring person to tears. Sometimes he wonders how people like her come into being if she had grown up with love and no worries. At least he understood her, but wasn't her father mired in gambling debts, which is why the whole family lived in extreme poverty? Eventually, he began to think that it was not the environment that was the problem, but himself. They say when poverty comes in through the door, love goes out through the window. Her mother in this world was always a gentle nature, and when this whole situation started to get worse, she only became more nervous. Eventually, at some point, she had to make the decision to stay in her hometown and suffer with her family, or move to the capital and become the head of the family yourself. Usually in such a situation, a person no longer has any compassion left to show to others, but she has a past that Diego doesn't know about. In fact, she is now little different from her past self. The love she received from her past life already fills her from within, and perhaps she still has some kindness left to give. But even if she tells Diego about it, it will only devalue his misfortune. "People stupidly want to turn back time," Diego said. But the mistakes of the past can no longer be corrected. Diego asked if he looked stupid. Not at all, Margaret answered, and Diego smiled sadly. He wanted her to pass it on. But if he doesn't give it to her himself, there's no point in it, Margaret said. Then let it be without any meaning, Diego replied, standing his ground. And he explained to the governess that he was saying this because he didn't even understand the meaning. Estella handed the die to Cecile, and the girl exclaimed enthusiastically how beautiful it was. The governess asked if she really liked it. Cecile capriciously asked to be taken to the mirror. Cecile admired herself. She liked it, but the problem was she looked like a princess. The teacher agreed with this, it really suited her, and then Cecile noticed that the hairpin was the same color as her eyes. Exactly, even without knowing who gave it to her, it turned out that there was meaning. The little girl agreed with her. And then Margaret reported that, in fact, it was Mr. Diego who had conveyed it. But Cecile indignantly asked why Diego needed it. Why? The teacher asked. It's just a gift for his younger sister. The little girl believed that Diego would not have done this, but in any case, Estella said that the next time they met, she should thank him. And she has to tell her something. The gift she received today must be kept secret from the young master. Why? Asked Cecile. Why keep it a secret? The governess said that one shouldn't speak so loudly. But then, unfortunately, Cedric appeared and asked the girls what this secret was. Estella excitedly told the gentleman that there was no secret and that he had simply misheard something. But then Cedric noticed the decoration on Cecile's head and asked what it was. Estella, with an anxious look, begged her mistress not to say anything. But it was all in vain, and the little girl honestly, and most importantly, contentedly, admitted that Diego had bought it for her. Cedric was simply horrified by this, or rather he could not believe what had happened. It's true, the boy asked indignantly, but where was his gift? Estella remained anxiously silent, but Cedric continued to find out where his gift was. The girl exhaled nervously, and everything would be fine, but the Duke asked her to give the gift to only one person. Why did he prepare only one gift? She mentally asked the younger Duke. This is what she was afraid of, so she wanted to keep everything a secret. But suddenly Cedric noticed something. This necklace, he exclaimed, pointing his finger. He had never seen it before. Could it be that her brother had bought this for her? Estella shuddered with fear and the realization that she had been caught. It's not like that, she tried to explain. She bought it to celebrate her payday. Cedric, already shaking with anger, shouted that it wasn't true. And starting to cry from resentment, he screamed and declared that she was poor. These words pierced Estella's soul and hit where it hurt most, continuing to sound in her head. This spoiled gentleman doesn't even know what caring for the socially vulnerable is, she realized. The girl tried to justify herself by saying that the necklace was a fake, but Cedric saw that it looked expensive. He comes from a rich family, so his eye is a diamond. She said it was a fake and asked where he got the money to buy it. But the boy cried and said that she didn't buy it, that her brother bought it, that simply couldn't happen. Cedric asked sadly and with hope for the best if he would really marry him. The teacher was indignant. Why did they only talk about marriage with him? Was that even possible? Cedric said that his brother had said he would marry her. Estella explained that he was just teasing them, and in any case, it was time for her to go. If they want to say something, they will say it tomorrow. And with these words, she ran away. Cedric indignantly called Estella. He shouted after her that she couldn't be with him. She couldn't be with her brother, trying to catch her breath. Estella locked herself in and thought that it looked like a brother complex. No matter how bad she was as a wife to his brother, how could she say that? She had never heard such rudeness. But soon Margaret hastened to drive these thoughts away from herself and not think about the bad. It already seemed to her that she even became strange when she was around her brothers. She was descending from the second floor down the stairs, where the young Duke was already waiting for her. Estella asked if he had arrived yet, and Diego grinned and said that he thought his neck would fall off while he was waiting for her. And then he extended his hand to the girl and said, "Come on." Estella did not understand what they wanted from her. And I asked him what he was doing. Diego said that they had to practice to make it look real. Continuing to reach out his hand to her, Diego carefully explained to the governess that he was talking about dancing. Estella tensed up and said that she would take generous overtime pay. Then Diego suggested that she immediately destroy all their supplies, and Margaret accepted his hand. Estella counted 1, 2, and also directed the dance, turn, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then she asked me to raise my hand and place it under her, as if supporting her, and move with an easy step. Pull slowly. Diego obediently followed the instructions and smiling asked, "So?" But then Estella stopped and said that Mr. Cedric was very upset today. Diego asked if it was because of him. Estella told the young duke how everything happened and how happy Cecile was with his gift. But she also explained that he had given the gift only to Madame Cecile, but Diego thought that Cedric was not interested in trinkets. The point was to buy only what the person liked. Estella asked if he was going to give something else. "Thinking about it now, why not?" Diego asked, looking just like a self-confident kindergartner. "In any case," she exclaimed, "children at that age are very sensitive to favoritism, so she asked him to be careful." But then Diego asked, "Doesn't she do the same?" Estella asked in surprise, "What about her?" Pressing the girl to himself by the waist, he said that during their dance lesson she continued to think only about children. Now, as he asked the teacher to pay attention to him, Margaret's heart began to beat strongly and her cheeks turned red. Diego looked at the governess's face with trepidation, expecting that when they were alone, she would look only at him. And Margaret, with trepidation and butterflies in her stomach, succumbed to the temptation of the beautiful face in front of her. But suddenly, grinning, he said, "It seems that now he should twirl it," and asked if it was right. Then Estella asked if he was sure he couldn't dance. Noticing the experience, Diego walked away from her gaze and hummed, saying, "It's not true." Estella asked him to admit that he was doing it on purpose, but Diego was not such a bad employer as to not allow his workers to rest. She thought that in that case he no longer needed to learn to dance, but Diego thought that it was just a warm-up. He still didn't feel confident. Strange, she thought with a frown. Judging by his skills, he should definitely be confident. But before she had time to come to her senses, Diego threw her back, continuing the dance, and Estella was very frightened. And it was he who claimed to be a newbie, and Diego mockingly asked if she knew what a funny expression she had on her face right now. She asked if he realized that he had practically confessed. Diego answered sheepishly, "The ability not to miss an opportunity is one of the secrets of a successful business." Then Margaret asked him to lift her up already, because it seemed that her back was about to break. Diego apologized for teasing her, and Estella was surprised that he was the first to apologize. Yes, even Diego was capable of that. He just found it funny to watch her react, so he made a joke, and it was really just for fun, so he doesn't need to justify it. And then Diego, flirting with Margaret, embarrassedly asked if she was angry, and the girl became embarrassed. She could help a little with the dancing since he had promised to pay extra for it. How dare he attack with his face? Diego really felt sorry for him, so he let him at least make amends somehow. He would listen to everything. Then Estella asked him to meet with Lady Adriana, but Diego flatly refused her, saying everything except that. The Duke asked with displeasure that deciding such an important matter as marriage over such nonsense, wasn't that too impudent? Then they would forget about it, she agreed sadly, but in return she asked Diego not to forget to buy a gift for Mr. Cedric. Diego asked if this was all she needed, but then the girl turned to the younger Duke, who listened to her attentively. Miss Margaret explained that it was not a trifle. The lady was very happy to receive the gift. And she was sure that the gentleman would be no less happy thinking about this. Her soul felt warm. That's why she asked Diego not to think of it as a trifle, and to be sure to give him something. Diego was once again convinced and surprised that she really only thought about children. Margaret froze in surprise, not understanding what the problem actually was. "No, nothing," Diego answered, holding out his hand and asking if she would allow him one more song. Touched by this and at the same time agreeing, she reminded them that they had no music, but Diego believed that this would not hinder them. They began to whirl again in an incredibly gentle and graceful dance, following each other's gaze. And then Diego seductively said that they could just hum a melody. But suddenly, their idol was interrupted by the question of what they were doing, and the couple immediately froze in displeasure. And Cedric, who had caught them, trembled with anger, or simply with indignation, and studied them with his eyes. And then he shouted and asked what the two of them were doing, clinging so tightly to each other. Estella didn't know what he was thinking, that it was all wrong. The younger Duke said he couldn't dance, so she was just teaching him. "It's a lie!" Cedric screamed, unable to find the words because of the chaos in his head. His brother is simply a god of ballroom dancing. Crying from resentment, Cedric ran away, shouting that the teacher was lying. All adults are liars. Margaret was unable to stop the gentleman when Cecile appeared and asked why Cedric had run away. The governess asked in surprise if she was there too. Yes, said Cecile, laughing slyly. She heard everything. She also wanted to learn to dance like a princess and promised to keep everything a secret. Yielding to the charms of the little girl, Estella exclaimed that she would teach her, that she wanted to teach her, and wondered why the children of this house were tormenting her so. Meanwhile, in the imperial palace, Lionel was yawning from fatigue, and a red-haired lady was walking towards him. "Oh my God, what people!" Madame gasped at the sight of the crown prince. Lionel glanced harmlessly to the side. Coming closer, the girl wondered what brought him here, the charming prince. At last, she deigned to notice him, Lionel noticed, and the aristocrat laughed in response. Because of such a frivolous whistle, she already thought that in front of her was a rude rake, mocking a decent girl. She would never have thought that it would be His Highness the Crown Prince. The guy rolled his eyes. But looking at the woman again, Lionel admitted that he himself found it difficult to believe that the woman who entered the man's bedroom at such a late hour was a countess. The girl stopped the embittered servant. If she walks at night, she is condemned for indecent behavior. But if she appears in broad daylight, they say that she has lost her shame and does not distinguish between day and night. She seemed to have misunderstood his genuine concern, Lionel explained, and suggested putting it more simply. Looming over the countess, the crown prince asked how the great priest had been living lately. Lionel looked at the countess with a grin, waiting to see how she would get out of this situation. The girl was worried and nervous, after which she waved him off and said that she didn't understand why he was asking. The crown prince chuckled and said to Countess Avel that if they both understood everything, then it was better not to beat around the bush. At that moment, he took an envelope out of his pocket and waved it in the air. The girl was horrified, realizing what was in his hands. Lionel asked if she was brave enough to face her sworn enemy, even knowing who his father was. At that very moment, the girl screamed for him to give it to her, attacking the prince, trying to snatch the letter from his hands. God, when she writes such sappy love letters, you have to be careful who delivers them. And who would have thought that she was capable of composing such touching lines, just like a young girl? The prince read the contents to his beloved high priest Delmar, who could not sleep a wink every night from longing. What a shameless person he is, the countess cried out desperately. Why is he treating her like this? She asked him to just leave her alone. Lionel himself was not pleased to use her betrayal as a lever of pressure, he admitted. To be honest, he doesn't care who she spends time with. He himself is not the kind of person who is obsessed with fidelity. His father is a man of old views and probably thinks differently, but since he and the Duchess are making fun of his father, he has no choice. The Countess, guessing, asked if he was doing this because of the heir of the Burt family, and the Crown Prince happily confirmed this. He had seen enough of her dazzling friendship with Duchess Anne. They said that when she went out into society, Anne gave her considerable help. When she made her first appearance, noble ladies did nothing but humiliate her and remind her of her demotion in title. But at that moment, in a difficult moment, Duchess Bertha extended her hand to the young girl. She supposed that she and Countess Camilla would have had plenty to discuss. But she had much more important things to protect than this friendship, right? The prince asked. Camilla asked, so if you help the younger duke get the title, then everything will be solved. Of course, the prince confirmed. Then everything would go on as usual, but now he believed that the negotiations were over, returning the letter to the owner. The girl doubted whether to take the letter back, and then Lionel asked if she would take it back. Countess Camilla doubted that he was giving her the letter so easily, but she took it anyway. But in return, the prince immediately said he would keep the answer from the high priest Delmar for himself. Of course, the countess thought irritably. What a sly fox. She didn't expect anything else. Camilla asked what else he was going to demand under this pretext, but Lionel needed time to think. Such antics gave Lionel a headache, and it gave him pleasure when such a woman, similar to his mother, looked at him with sympathy. And then the guy asked, but this is it. Is she really ready to sell her youth for money? If her interest in her father has faded, maybe it's time to stop. She's still young and it's not too late for a new start. Camilla didn't know what he was thinking, but the high priest was just a chance meeting for fun. It depends on what happened between them in bed, the heir replied. Whether she had only gained pleasure or information as well, Camilla chuckled, and she explained to the youth that they had only sinned by whispering words of love to each other. Who knows, he answered. After all, she was a woman who enjoyed betrayal. For a moment the Countess froze, but later she told the prince that she was not interested in men who still had milk on their lips. After a pause, Lionel asked tensely if that was why she only dated old men. It was better than the ardent, empty young fools. With age, a person accumulates a lot of things. It may not seem like it, but in the end she gets much more than she puts in. But the time had come to go, and with these words the Countess walked away with the servants. The prince was amazed, and this woman whispers sweet words to the high priest. What nonsense. She was probably trying to squeeze money out of a man who, having lost his head, was ready to take his wife away from his enemy. Lionel exhaled heavily and admitted that he could not understand this man. While at the ball, Margaret immediately asked if he remembered what to tell people, which infuriated Diego. He repeated to her the words he had previously learned about the miserable life of a governess and asked if it would do great, the girl answered. But then Diego, looking at his companion, said that today she looked like a completely different person. Margaret, surprised, said that she couldn't understand whether it was an insult or a compliment. Diego, surprised, asked if she had been deceived all her life. Compliment or not, if she's going to immerse herself in the role, she should just enjoy it, because she's beautiful. Estella took his hand, and they walked into the palace. Today, the fate of so many people depended on this ball. At the ball, there were many different conversations about new music at the ball and being. It was then that the couple noticed the young Duke Bert, who had come to the event. Diego wished good evening to Marquis Formens. His family had not seen him until late in the evening and thought that he would not come. Diego admitted that he himself did not want this, but if his father was no longer there, shouldn't he fill the empty space? He said he was a strict man, but that was probably just a manifestation of his responsibility as the head of the family. It had once been difficult for him to understand his father, but it seemed that everything was different now, and he thought that he, too, wanted him to be here today. The Marquis and the Marchioness discussed that the Duchess was probably proud of such a worthy son and wished to confirm his inheritance as soon as possible. Estella was amazed at how someone could lie like that without even blinking an eye. What a scoundrel, as if he were not the one who would have laughed with joy at the Duke's grave. All men are cunning, she said under her breath, but then the Marquise noticed her presence. And when Miss Montiel told her that she was simply charming, Margaret was embarrassed, not expecting a compliment in her direction. The woman said that as soon as she saw her, she thought it was a fairy passing by. Margaret said that she was being flattered. But then a voice came from behind. The ladies admitted that they were actually interested in which boutique she ordered this dress from. At that moment, many of the girls rushed at Miss Montiel with questions, and Estella asked them one by one. But suddenly, Diego put his arm around Estella's waist and, pressing her to himself, informed the ladies that they had taken in the dress together. Margaret blushed and placed her hand on his chest, and Diego said that he had had to torment Madame Lola quite a bit to get her to find the right fabric. The ladies asked admiringly if he had personally sewn this dress for Miss. Diego confirmed that it was exactly so. The girl was curious about her relationship with Mr. Diego and asked if she could introduce them. Margaret asked to be allowed to tell the story herself, but Diego called out, interrupting Miss Montiel. He reminded her that she had said that she was supposed to greet the mentor today. What, not understanding the gentleman, asked Estella, but he, smiling, said that it was time for her to go. The guy came close to her ear and whispered that they hadn't even eaten yet, promised to take care of everything, and asked her to bring them something. From the outside, it looked even better, as if a couple in love were having a sweet conversation with each other. Margaret informed the ladies that she had someone else to meet, so it was time for her to go, and wished them a good evening. The girls were sad to say goodbye to Miss Montiel, and they begged their sunshine not to leave. What luck, she was able to escape and get rid of such awkward company, and she could breathe a sigh of relief. But suddenly the girl wondered why he sent her away, because he brought her here under a different pretext. Diego said that it had been only a short time since his father's funeral, and if he attended, he would be irritated with questions about it. But her thoughts faded into the background when she saw the laid table in front of her. The girl was hungry because she was fiddling with the dress, and, in general, she could ask him later. While she was thinking about it herself, she still wouldn't get an answer, but then Miss Margaret was pulled by the sleeve. The girl who called out to her was Lady Adriana, who said admiringly that she looked very beautiful today. Even from afar, her gaze was fixed only on her. Margaret thanked her, saying that she looked just as beautiful. The girl noticed that her dress was too simple for the daughter of a marquis, but still. The main character was her. No one in this hall could shine as brightly as she, Lady Adriana. Adriana said, embarrassed, that she was not that beautiful, but suddenly she froze. She asked what about her request. Margaret asked her not to worry about it. Calling the waiter over, she whispered something in his ear. The man understood her and made a gesture with his fingers and walked away. Adriana was surprised and wanted to ask about it. But Estella interrupted the girl and, patting her on the shoulder, suggested that they go to the terrace. Later, Diego stepped onto the terrace and, seeing the lady, asked why she suddenly called her to the terrace. So that was what this hidden motive was. The Duke understood. Adriana felt awkward in front of him. She kept crossing the line, so he expected better grounds for negotiation than last time. Bowing to the younger Duke, she asked first of all to apologize for having asked for a meeting without his permission, and also for even dragging Miss Margaret into this and putting her in an awkward position. Diego smirked as he noticed that she had worked so hard for this chance, so he told her to try to convince him. Although he didn't even know how much better the conditions had become. Adriana still hesitated but took a step forward. It wasn't a matter of conditions. Margaret admitted that she had come here today in the hope of his last mercy. The Duke grinned and said that if she wanted to please him, she should at least know that he was not the type to show pity. Adriana was already accepting defeat in horror, and Diego said that at the same time he knew her very well. She was the eldest daughter of the Marquis of Assisi. But, unfortunately, she turned out to be an outcast and her father was going to marry her off to a man who was 40 years older than her. Adriana tried to understand how he knew, and the Duke asked if she thought he wouldn't investigate, at least to that extent. So that means he already knows everything about her, said Adriana, driven into a corner. In that sense, it's even for the best. She was scared, but she grabbed every opportunity. She was already in a hopeless situation. Once she is driven into a corner, she will do so that, at least with the help of the secret that she knows, she can drag someone else into the same trouble. But the young Duke was also confident in his abilities and asked Lady Adriana to listen. He asked if she hadn't heard that he had already conducted an investigation into her. The girl shuddered. In his opinion, it would be better to unite with her father than to deal with an impudent woman who threatened him. If she started spreading his secret, he would go to Marquis Assisi, Diego warned menacingly. Then her father will happily send her to a mental hospital. Adriana was terrified. It was still a failure. Her body was constricted with fear to the point of trembling. This man wasn't trying to scare her now. He was quite capable of locking her in a mental hospital. She didn't even doubt it. And falling to her knees, the girl in despair asked what to do. What should she do? What should she do? The little girl worried. There was nothing to do, the Duke reassured her, informing her that he would fulfill her request. When she leaves here, she must find the Crown Prince. If he tells him his name, he will take the necessary measures. What did this mean? The rejected girl tried to clarify, but the Duke told her to listen carefully. Simply put, he was going to replace the main character in her plan, Diego confidently reported. If it was about the Crown Prince of her homeland, then the marriage with Granton III would definitely fall through. Her father decided that he could sell her to a better place. The girl asked why His Highness would help her, and Diego said that it was profitable to eat, but Adriana still did not understand why he was doing this for her. And grinning, Diego explained that, of course, this was not selfless help. The first condition was silence. The Duke asked if she could keep his secret, and the girl confirmed that she could, promising that she would take this secret to her grave. That was a good idea, so now they need to go out and do one more thing for him. At the same time, another man approached Miss Margaret, asking if he could ask her to dance. Estella awkwardly refused the man, nervously informing him that she was waiting for her partner. She had already refused for the 12th time, but the truth is, no one really tried to hit on her. Sometimes, of course, someone tried to approach her seriously, but he was quickly driven away by someone else. They say that this lady came here with the younger Duke Berta, and then the guys immediately ran away. It was good that they ran away with their tails between their legs, no longer disturbing Estella. But while she was gone, Diego probably told everyone something strange. But suddenly Lionel turned to Miss Margaret and asked why she was alone. Estella replied that she was waiting for her partner. The Crown Prince laughed and asked how it was possible to leave such a beautiful lady alone. Lionel noticed what a useless partner she had without saying anything, knowing full well that he was talking about a friend. Of course, Margaret agreed with him and asked the gentleman if he had any other business with her. The crown prince laughed at the word lord. She said lord. The guy put his hand on the pole behind the girl's back and hung over her, and he asked if she really didn't know him. Estella looked at the guy emotionlessly. Lionel looked at Miss Margaret's face with a sweet smile, and the girl asked who he was. She assumed that he was a friend of the Duke. The prince confirmed that this was true, but he came here to see Miss Montiel. That stone guy suddenly became quite close with the younger children, probably all thanks to her. He had never thought of caring for others before, and this remark infuriated Margaret. Margaret noticed that he said they were friends, but his words were quite harsh. The girl said that the younger Duke was a good man. If he has never felt cared for by him, isn't it because he himself is not the type to want that kind of attention? Estella turned away from the crown prince in displeasure, leaving the boy in the dark. But suddenly Estella realized that she seemed to have gone too far. However, having received so many precious gifts, she could not listen to ill-wishers. This was definitely not according to the rules of decency. Lionel told Miss Montiel that she seemed to enjoy unusual addresses, calling him young man and Diego simply good. Then Estella assumed that he was already married, but this was not so. Moreover, people usually called him differently. And besides, in his dictionary, he didn't even have such a word as marriage. Margaret had to admit that this was not the most common solution, but the guy threw up his hands and said, "That's just how it happened. A man whose pure love has been trampled upon can by nature no longer trust such a being as a woman." What is he doing? Margaret thought, puzzled, looking at the guy in front of her who had spoken. It seemed that he was just a handsome rake, but it turns out that he is a romantic to the depths of his soul. But then a tearful Lady Adriana came out from the balcony. Estella ran up to her asking what happened. The girl quickly wiped away her tears and apologized to Miss Margaret. She had helped her so much. But it seemed she had no other choice. Estella froze in horror. Adriana asked her not to worry. With a dowry, she would be able to thank her properly. Margaret asked the lady not to speak like that. She was sure there had to be another way out, but it would all be over if she gave in. And she asked the lady to allow her to speak once more with the younger Duke, bowing immediately. The price she paid was only a pain in her hip to bring tears, but what would happen to Miss Margaret? Adriana worried. When Margaret finally disappeared, the Crown Prince said that he would live with guilt for the rest of his life. He spoke with concern. This Diego, this fox, just ruined the life of one normal person. The guy didn't understand what he had said, that even that girl started saying that he was a good person. But then he turned to the lady and, for information, decided to ask her name. After bowing, the girl greeted His Highness the Crown Prince and introduced herself as Adriana, daughter of the Marquis of Asqueza. Lionel immediately perked up, glad that thanks to her he wouldn't have to go far, and he invited the lady to go there to look at her unworthy father. By that time, Margaret had come out onto the balcony to see Duke Bertha, who was already waiting for her. As she passed, the girl called out to the younger Duke, and Diego immediately looked back at Miss Margaret. He told the governess that he was very angry now and thought that she knew the reason for it perfectly well. Estella looked up, her voice so cold it was as if she was back in the moment when they first met. Bowing, Margaret asked the younger Duke's forgiveness, admitting that she had used her position to achieve her goal. It seemed that there were no pitfalls here. Lionel and Adriana had already approached Marquis Asquezu. But unable to remain indifferent, looking at the disaster that appeared before him, the lady justified herself. And Diego knew it. He thought he wanted to save Lady Adriana. He asked Miss Margaret if she wanted him to help Lady Adriana, and even if she wanted him to marry her. He asked if she would become a good person, then she would leave him to bear all the burdens, right? But it never occurred to Margaret that Diego might think of it that way. If you look at it this way, she is the only one who knew that Diego and Adriana were destined to be together. Only she knows that all the misfortunes that may soon befall Adriana were not her original destiny. Because of this information, she was only focused on getting the two closer. Estella informed the younger Duke that she had not meant to commit such a shameless act. She asked for forgiveness, but suddenly shuddered and froze. She finally realized that Diego was not a paper doll and that he had his own feelings and thoughts. He is a real person at heart, and she didn't pay attention to Diego's feelings. Diego asked if that was not her motive for giving him Lady Adriana in return for his help. "What?" Estella asked, stunned. "What could a simple governess offer a duke?" Diego asked Miss Margaret to allow him to propose again. He asked the lady to marry him. If she did so, he would give Adriana a chance at life. The Duke had no intention of getting involved with this girl, but she wanted it so desperately. "Why?" Miss asked in amazement. Were there so many young girls besides herself who would like to marry him? Since she brought it up, he would explain again that the reason he was proposing to her was because he couldn't create a true destiny. He didn't want to live his whole life with a secret he couldn't even tell his wife, so she asked if Lady Adriana wasn't in the same situation. "No, everything is different," Diego said, holding Margaret's hand. He trusted her. He knew a woman who died after her husband betrayed her. It was an extremely sad case. And as far as he could tell, she was a trustworthy person. She cared so desperately about people. And she was so kind and naive that she considered him a good person. She will never betray him. She is a wise teacher, but most importantly, she is a good person. At Diego's words, Margaret's heart skipped a beat in response. But she still awkwardly asked how she could become a duchess if she came from a bankrupt family. But Diego smiled and asked her not to worry about it. Does she really think that the former duchess, locked in a separate building, was of such high origin? When he acts like a drugged fool who has lost his head over her, and they have a lavish engagement, then no one else will be able or dare to look down on her. He was indeed incredibly perceptive and left no opportunity to escape. Then Estella asked Diego to keep his promise and save Lady Adriana. Of course, the young Duke answered her. He would never allow her to be sold. Good. To the Duke's surprise, the word echoed in his head. On these terms, Margaret accepted his proposal of marriage. And the morning greeted Margaret with a piercing cry from one of the children. Cedric, who came running to her in tears, screamed indignantly, but she said that she would not marry his brother. He called her a liar, saying that all the servants were talking about was their engagement, and the teacher said that she really had no intention of doing so. During this time, something happened, the lady explained. It was a kind of role-playing game, to put on a performance so that everyone got what they wanted. But Cedric did not believe her, and shouted that she was lying, asking what his brother would get by marrying a beggar like her. He screamed that she couldn't cope with his brother. He was unbearable. But Margaret couldn't stand it anymore. A boy who burst into a girl's room early in the morning is absolutely unacceptable. She threw the boy out the door and locked it from the inside. Cedric continued to scream, calling for Estella. She really felt very sorry that she was taking away his beloved brother, the master, from him, but nothing could be returned. Estella didn't know that things would turn out this way and wondered if she could really marry him. She, the girl, looked at herself in the mirror, not believing that everything turned out exactly this way. It felt like ever since she moved into this estate, she couldn't predict what would happen the next day. Indeed, before the girl had time to think about it, during lunch, Diego informed Miss Margaret that she was fired. Margaret stood frozen in confusion, wondering if it was really necessary to make everything so unpredictable.